Dom, welcome to the show.
Great to be on, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is a long-awaited gift. I've been listening to you for we're in 2021, so I started listening to you in 2015. Then I found out you were in Tampa, like me. You're a professor at USF, a scientist, and yeah, man, there's a lot of questions that I wish that when I did have a platform in 2015, I could ask you directly, and now I can, which is pretty awesome. And super excited for this.
I'm excited to be on. Thanks. Yeah, it's amazing. You're right in Tampa. Right at USF there, and we live in a farm and plant city, and
It's crazy,
yeah, just in my backyard.
right there, man. That's crazy. Small world. Cool, man. So tell people a little bit. Obviously, people know you. You've been on Rogan. You've been on Tim Ferris. You've been on a lot of high top tier premium podcasts. So a lot of people know who you are. A lot of people know about the ketogenic diet, getting into ketosis. Obviously, there's a lot of different diets that people are into, whether it's carnivore, vegan, paleo, ketogenic. We can get into all of that, but tell people that have no idea who you are, first time seeing you, a little bit about you, what you do, and what you're striving for, and your goals in this life.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, I'm really passionate about neuroscience, and that's why I did my PhD back in the 1990s. Early 1990s, the decade of the brain. Was really fired up about neuroscience, although I did an undergrad in nutrition science and biology. And that was more like a personal interest because I was really into fitness and powerlifting and bodybuilding and all that stuff. And I just wanted to learn how to, change my body composition, get big as strong as possible. But as I progressed through undergrad, I went into neuroscience and physiology. So, how the brain controls our body. So, the neural control of autonomic regulation, specifically like respiratory control. So, I studied the brainstem mechanisms that control breathing. So, it's an autonomic regulation. Luckily, we don't have to think to breathe. So, it's autonomic. So, I looked at the different mechanisms that controlled the breathing process and oxygen sensing, CO2 sensing, and how neurons sense oxygen and CO2, and then the pathways. And I studied, how neurons communicate to one another. And I became very interested in diving. And my PhD mentor at the time got me into scuba diving. So I did quite a bit of training, working to advanced level training in diving in a quarry in Pennsylvania, actually not fancy diving place, but just basically focused on academic training and skill training. And then that got me into, it gave me a certain level of expertise to apply to the Navy, the Office of Navy Research, which is part of the Department of Defense. And I did my postdoctoral fellowship developing a new technology called atomic force microscopy, which I was using this, it helped expand the field of nanotechnology, but I was using atomic force microscopy on biological samples. And it could give the scanning resolution of an electron microscope, but you can image living tissue with it. And my job was to put this thing inside a hyperbaric chamber and then simulate conditions that a Navy SEAL would experience, which is high pressure oxygen because they use a closed circuit rebreather. And it was very fundamental science because you're looking at very basic mechanisms. And then later on, I adapted like laser scanning confocal so we could look at the mitochondria. So these are the energy producing organelles within the cells. And I would do these experiments and give the neurons different fuel sources like glucose. And I was very interested in lactate, like alpha L polylactate. And I was interested in fueling the neurons to make them super neurons and hitting them with high levels of oxygen and stress and even like toxins like glutamate or environmental, like certain toxic chemicals. And long story short, did a lot of research and published methods papers on this technology. And I discovered the ketogenic diet was actually used for seizures, which is a consequence of central nervous system oxygen toxicity or CNS oxygen toxicity. And I thought it would be cool to bring back nutrition back into my research program with the ketogenic diet and develop exogenous ketone supplements like ketone esters and various ketone salt formulations and apply that to the problem of oxygen toxicity mitigation. And long story short, we spent 5 years from start to finish, and then we got our first ketone molecule that worked, and that actually worked better than any anti-seizure drug or medication that or experimental compound that we tested inside this hyperbaric chamber on cells, on brain tissue, and animal models. And now we do we put humans inside a hyperbaric chamber and we pressurize them and push them to the edge of seizure. And then we do field work, sometimes where I'm the subject living in a hyperbaric environment. And even my wife was part of a NASA mission where we live underwater. So we study everything from at the level of the cell membrane to the mitochondrial membrane. And the idea is to enhance metabolic control and the neuropharmacology of the brain to make it more resilient, to enhance performance resilience. So specifically, things are developed to allow one to do their job in an environment where they would otherwise be having a seizure. And that's sort of the main focus of what we're doing. But we do cancer research, we study rare genetic diseases. And I have PhD students doing a bunch of different things, and med students and even high school students work in the lab.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible, man. Did you plan on... Yeah, absolutely. Did you plan on putting the ketogenic diet on the map? Because you are the guy that did that.
Yeah, no, the ketogenic diet has been around for 100 years, actually. In 1921, it was developed at the Mayo Clinic, and it was largely marginalized as a therapy for epilepsy in the 1960s when anti-epileptic drugs came along. But the anti-epileptic drugs really never had the success track record of the ketogenic diet. Like, if you can create a ketogenic diet in a pill, that would be a blockbuster drug, and it would do away with many anti-seizure drugs. But neurologists and epileptologists, they're not trained in how to implement the ketogenic diet, which the medical ketogenic diet's kind of hard to formulate and follow. So it wasn't until 1994, because I remember I was in college, just starting college, where Jim Abrams was on a program called Dateline NBC. And Jim Abrams, a Hollywood producer, he produced the movie Airplane, Naked Gun. I later reached out to him, and that's a whole nother story. And it was part of my TED Talk when I discovered, his story. But his son Charlie had drug-resistant seizures, and only after someone like him got very angry that the doctors did not use the ketogenic diet on his son, who sustained like horrible side effects with all the anti-epileptic drugs, did that educational outreach, if you want to call it that, media attention. And if you look at PubMed, you see a spike in the papers and the clinical trials looking at the ketogenic diet. And then, I went through a nutrition program, and all I just heard negative things about the ketogenic diet and low carb diet. It was, a fad, weight loss. And I was not even really given the education that it was a standard of care for epilepsy, drug-resistant epilepsy. So I discovered it way after other people had been using it, but it was largely marginalized. And when I discovered that it could be used in this approach, I was very skeptical how a diet could totally change like your brain energy and your, I was just really taught that glucose was the only fuel that the brain could use. And, but I reached out to Johns Hopkins. I remember the late John Freeman, who wrote several books, Eric Kossoff, Dr. Jung Rowe, a whole list of, medical doctors in the upper echelons at great universities. And they told me that, I remember an email with Dr. Jung Rowe. He said he thought that the ketogenic diet could ameliorate CNS oxygen toxicity in Navy SEALs if it was applied properly. But the Department of Defense didn't really like the ketogenic diet. It was high fat, it was like you put the guys on the diet and then they have to use the diet for a period of time before doing a mission. So they wanted to be able to consume something that would put the body into a state of therapeutic ketosis that would be at a level that would be neuroprotective, and then going into the mission, and the substance could not impair physical or cognitive performance. So it was a long road to really convince the military that this could be an approach, but it had an amazing track record of an anti-seizure metabolic therapy. So I began writing, grants. Most of them just got rejected, and I kept, using that feedback to then craft a proposal that was more compelling. And then it was like, okay, let me see what you got here. So they'll started out with a decent size level of funding, and then we funded a ketone ester that worked. It just kind of blew our mind. I remember we're all standing around this hyperbaric chamber, and we're looking through the window port of a rat that had went way beyond the period that it would typically have a seizure. It would have died like a long time ago, and it was grooming itself like nothing was happening. And we acutely 30 minutes before, putting it in that extreme environment, administered the compound. And it was not a drug per se. It was a form of food. It was a calorie containing substance that completely changed the animal's physiology and brain chemistry. And I knew I kind of had something. And then I was like, well, this could be like just a super rat, a fluke. But then every animal we did, had this effect. And I got super motivated to the point where I was like addicted to really understanding what was going on. I got completely immersed in the science of it. I was experimenting on myself with different things and probably I shouldn't be doing. So yeah, it's been a fun ride. And that all started maybe, I don't know, 14 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So just so people, they don't know like the basis of like the ketogenic diet or being in ketosis, right?
Yeah.
So besides hindering the growth of, cancer cells and tumors, at very minimum, stopping the growth, possibly even decreasing the growth of it. Besides that, why would like a normal average Joe day-to-day person, maybe an entrepreneur, someone that wants to be optimal, jump on the ketogenic diet versus doing all meat diet, vegan diet, normal diet, high carb diet? If somebody wants to be 10 out of 10, Bradley Cooper and limitless cognitively, would you recommend the ketogenic diet is the best way to go? And then what's the mechanism of action, why it is?
Yeah, well, I'll explain. I try not to oversell it because it's not for everybody. That's for sure. It's not a magic diet. It's not even really what Atkins promoted as a diet that would have a metabolic advantage and that would allow you to effortlessly lose weight without counting calories or anything like that. You do have to count calories, like on a ketogenic diet. Clinical ketogenic diet is very calculated for things like epilepsy. But when I started studying it, I did the medical ketogenic diet, and my strength and performance dropped in the gym. And after about 2 or 3 months, when I improved I was probably not eating enough calories. As I increased my calories, and my strength gradually started to come back. But I realized that I had more sustained energy throughout the day and more focus. And it was at a particular time where I was really had to push hard. I was in a tenure track position, had to be very productive as far as getting a lot of publications, a lot of grants, a lot of committee work. I was doing a ton of teaching and things like that at the time. And a ketogenic diet gave me the mental resilience, I guess, and endurance to power through all that. And I could even fast for long periods of time. Sometimes you can't eat when you're doing research, like you're in an animal facility or a particular area where you can't bring water or food in. And sometimes you'd be there for, 7, 8 hours. And I noticed that if I had like a ketogenic breakfast, like I just wouldn't get hungry throughout the day. I wouldn't get the hunger pangs. If the blood glucose dropped, it wasn't a hypoglycemic crisis because your ketones would be elevated, and that would sustain your brain energy. So your brain and your metabolism had this resilience, this kind of backup fuel. So I think that's important. It saved time preparing meals, eating meals. I wouldn't intermittent fast all the time, but I could, and that was very, very liberating. And so I think there's a lot of advantages to just metabolic resilience. But then a lot of what we study now are the signaling properties of ketones. So the ketone molecule is kind of like a hormone in that it has a receptor, it has several receptors. It turns on epigenetic mechanisms. We have a paper that's just coming out, and I'll be releasing the blog later today on adenosine. Ketones, one of the things that jumped out is that adenosine levels come up, and we associate adenosine with getting sleepy, and because caffeine's an adenosine receptor antagonist. but adenosine also dilates blood vessels and increases blood flow to the brain and muscle, and it has all these interesting effects and signaling properties. So a lot of what we study now is actually the signaling effect of ketones. It also increases GABA to glutamate ratio. So if I injected you with glutamate, you would get super anxious and have a seizure. So what the ketogenic diet does, and then we discovered exogenous ketone esters and ketone salt formulations do this too. It activates an enzyme called glutamic acid decarboxylase. There's GAD65 and 67. So what this does is actually it converts more of the glutamate to GABA. So you have glutamate's excitatory and GABA is inhibitory and calming and brain stabilizing, and it can actually like enhance. It could be nootropic. I mean, phenibut is a phenylated form of GABA that crosses the blood-brain barrier and actually like can enhance your flow of thoughts and things like that. So a lot of people say they become more lucid on a keto. They're less anxious, and a lot of times anxiety prevents us from doing our best. We can't think because we're anxious. And then when we drop the level of anxiety, even though it's GABA, that should be making us sleepy, we have more energy because we're decreasing the anxiety, which is like depleting us of energy because of the anxiety. So we are studying, there's a broad range of research being done now, and you would call it metabolic psychiatry, where doctors like Chris Palmer at Harvard, and we have a speaker at Stanford who's going to be talking about the utility of a ketogenic diet for things like bipolar and schizophrenia and anxiety and behavioral. So it's opened up a whole nother field where people are repurposing. So you can repurpose a drug, like metformin's being used for longevity, and metformin, there's probably about 200 clinical trials using metformin as an anti-cancer drug. So people are repurposing a clinical medical therapy, which is a ketogenic diet, for over, at last count, like 14 or 15 different applications outside of its medical use in epilepsy.
Wow.
And we're doing quite a few of those different applications actually in our lab.
Did you notice a difference? Like, you might not be able to remember this because you've been in ketosis for so long, but did you notice a difference? Maybe you tested it with a breath, or you did the precision extra where you did the blood test. Did you notice a difference cognitively when jumping from, high glucose state to a ketogenic state?
I did, from the perspective of typically I can work for about 60 minutes at most, but when I was in a state of deep ketosis, whether it be fasting or the ketogenic diet or exogenous ketones, I could maintain a flow state of working and just typing and working on a manuscript or a grant for stretches of 2 or 3 hours. And then I would take a break, take a walk and come back. And then previous to that, and maybe I had, undiagnosed ADHD, I would just be drinking a lot of coffee and just trying to stay focused. And it would be very difficult for me to do that until I started the ketogenic diet. And then my flow state was able to be maintained for longer durations of time, and that increased my productivity. And it became an enabling factor. And also I didn't have to stop and eat a meal, and that disrupts your flow of thought because if you're working for 2 or 3 hours, you typically get hungry, right? But if you're on a ketogenic diet or you're doing intermittent fasting, you just kind of power through that. And the hunger kind of gives you a little bit like an edge. Like I feel once I start getting hungry, like that's when the flow state starts. And that's when I kind of get into my best thinking, when I'm a little bit hungry, right? That postprandial dip, like sometimes when I'm working at home and I eat a late lunch, usually I will go do a walk with the dogs and come back. And that would kind of help attenuate that postprandial dip you get during the day.
Yeah, I've heard that Derek from More Plates, More Dates, he talks about that. He says after you eat, to utilize your food to the the optimal level, 10 out of 10. Every time you eat, go for a 15-minute walk. No matter if you're on a ketogenic diet, carnivore, vegan, it doesn't matter. Always go on a 15-minute walk afterwards. Obviously, if you're a bodybuilder and you're eating 4, 5, 6 times a day, I guess that is their career. So I guess you could do that, but it might be a little harder if you have like a like a real job and you're not an entrepreneur and you can kind of like do whatever you want and you're always working, but you can kind of control your work schedule versus you have a structured schedule like you work in corporate America. But I've heard that 15 minutes after eating anything to utilize the the food and get things going. I didn't really understand the mechanism of action, but I knew that that was a benefit, and a lot of high intellectual people recommend that.
It's the mechanism would be non-insulin dependent glucose disposal. Not to so when you eat a meal, even if you eat no carbs like protein, your glucose is going to come up a little bit, and then you cause a little bit of insulin to be released, and that helps to store it and where you need it, liver glycogen, muscle glycogen. But if you eat a meal and then go for a walk, the very act of contracting the muscles can help facilitate glucose to go into the muscle and put it into places where it would be less likely to be stored as fat. And also, if you eat a meal and then go for a walk, you release less insulin, and then that can promote better metabolic health. So I actually wear a continuous glucose monitor, and I use a software program called Levels Health, and it was the founder is Casey Means, medical doctor from Stanford, and Josh Clemente he worked in SpaceX with Elon Musk to develop the life support system. Yeah, he's so they reached out to. I met Josh at a CrossFit event, and then I've been using their app, and it was only through like actually looking at my continuous glucose monitor that I realized, hey, I should be doing this. Like I kind of intuitively knew it, but I didn't know it until after looking at the data from a continuous a dashboard for your metabolism.
Say that last part. You cut out. Say that last part.
Yeah,
you cut out a little bit.
It's like wearing a continuous glucose monitor is like having an instrument panel or a dashboard for the most important metabolic fuel that your body is using, which is glucose. Wow. And there's people working on a continuous ketone monitor. There's continuous lactate monitors that are being used. In the future, you can think about there's going to be essentially like real-time metabolomics, where you're going to have a bunch of different metabolites that are measured, in the interstitial fluid or maybe through your skin. I know Apple's working on that. That you can look at your smartphone and basically see, okay, to be optimized going into my workout or into my meeting, I should consume, a shake that has this or whatever. It's like where that last meal really disrupted this metabolic profile. So I'm going to not eat that again, or eat less of it, or try another meal. And I think really that's kind of the future. And that's the Department of Defense is really pushing this, because they put certain guys in extreme environments where the limitation is not the machine. Like if you put a guy in a fighter jet, like it pulls massive G's, and it basically can take you beyond the ability of human physiology as far as G-force and things like that. So the warfighter pilot has all this feedback from the machine, but we don't have feedback on the guy piloting the machine, who is the limitation of the machine. So if you could put a patch on you that gives that information to yourself, but also to the team, at mission control or whatever, then they can, you can be better informed to utilize that machine and conduct your mission in a successful way. There's a whole program called Instrumenting the Warfighter, and a lot of technologies are evolving out of that.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, how would that compare to something like modafinil, like Provigil, or like like ADHD medication? Because I've heard that a lot of the time in military they'll give soldiers Adderall and Vyvanse and modafinil, Provigil, armodafinil, adrafinil, Phenibut, all these different type of nootropics. How would the ketogenic stack up to an ADHD medication or a narcolepsy medication like Provigil?
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring that up, because I don't think it's talked about much, but I've talked about this to the teams guys a lot, the special operators. They have like very extreme sleep disruption, right? So they sometimes they do their missions at night. So and they also use, what's the drug, Ambien, to fall asleep. So sometimes they'll take like 2 Ambien and then 2 modafinil to wake up and pop out of it, which is not the best. So I think more education is needed to, get your sleep health and sleep hygiene going. But modafinil is used quite a bit. I mean, it's used sparingly from the perspective of it being prescribed and given to the warfighter. But 200 to 400 milligrams is typically the dose for that. If there is, if they're going into, that would give me a crushing headache. I think one time, I don't know, you remember because you're in Tampa, when Hurricane Irma came in. Do you remember that? That was the first time I ever took modafinil. I stayed up all night.
What year was
it
that?
Irma?
2017?
It was September 2017. And I remember our house in Tampa had a basement. And I stayed up all night, and all we heard is stuff crashing around. I was thinking we didn't know what was happening to the house, but it wasn't like it was kind of, it went from a category 4 to 2 or whatever.
Right. It didn't do anything, but everyone
crashing all around us. Yeah. We had a rare house in Tampa that actually had a basement, but I knew I had to stay up all night just to stay vigilant. And I had some modafinil. I was like, oh, this would be a good time for modafinil. So I took modafinil, and then the next day I was up, just cutting with the chainsaw all day, just getting our neighbors out, and just,
why is Dom so active? He's so motivated.
Yeah. And it, I didn't know why. I thought it was like the change in, the barometric pressure, but I had a crushing headache all day, and I took 200 milligrams, I think. And then I later found out that modafinil is a great tool, but I have like 200 milligram tablets. I would break it in half and then break it in a quarter. And that 50 milligrams with a cup of coffee is more than I would never take more than 50 milligrams. And when we traveled to like Australia and Thailand and other, when I'm totally flipped as far as, the worst is going to Europe actually. Wow. So I will, when I travel internationally, that's when I bring my modafinil, and that kind of wakes me up and then resets.
Because we're not sure how it works, right? Like the mechanism of action. It's I think they said they're not 100% sure, but it works on the circadian rhythm and kind of biohacking the circadian rhythm versus like something like Adderall, where it is an amphetamine, where it's pushing dopamine and pushing the receptors out. Modafinil works more on the circadian rhythm, and they're not really sure why it works, but they have speculation to think that it works off of that process. So it's interesting. Yeah. People,
it has a good safety record relative to dexedrine or the amphetamines, and it's less dopaminergic. Like I don't look forward to taking it. What I had is expired a long time ago. But I don't get a euphoria from it. So it's not very dopaminergic. I think the mechanism, from what I know, is anti-GABAergic. So GABA will make you sleep, maybe through the adenosine receptors too. There's a little bit going on. But I know whenever I take it, I will take it like in the morning. I sleep like a baby later in the night. And I know other versions of these things have longer half-lives, and they can cause sleep disruption. So, but modafinil, I think, taken first thing in the morning, when you're at a new location and you have to get your circadian, reset. But there's no sun, exercise, things like that. I'm always going for that first. But modafinil can give you a push, especially if you're doing something that's you're really cognitively task loaded. It becomes important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like a wakefulness drug, right? So, so I think I watched the Supraphysiological man, and it was for the high level entrepreneurs. It's 50 milligrams of modafinil and then 5 milligrams of amphetamines, whether that would be Adderall or what's the other one? Vyvanse. That the other one is methoxystrine or whatever, and then that is what is that? Ritalin, and then the other one. Yeah. So
I know all these drugs. I used to teach kids in special education, or kids that had behavioral problems, and like half of the class were on these drugs before I really knew what they were. Back when I was in college, I've never taken any kind of amphetamine. I've taken modafinil, ephedrine, but other than that, I haven't really taken any of the. So I don't have a way to gauge and compare it to that.
Ketosis. Again, guys, this is not medical. This is not medical advice. We're just talking like two friends.
Yeah, but I really do think that because I have loved ones and family and stuff that have used the drugs in the past. I don't know for ADHD and things like that, and close friends that have kids that use these drugs. So I do think that they're a potential problem for the developing brain. Using these
Yeah, and
drugs
the
and
adolescent.
being. Yeah, when you sit
Yeah.
down, I had students that I used to study with, and they would not put in the time and work. Like they would get their cup of coffee, open their pills, take it. Okay, now I'm ready to study. It's like they wouldn't even like try to
Yeah. It's
study
like a
for a test
pre-workout.
without. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a
And
pre-workout
I'm
for
pretty
a
coffee's
cognitive
pretty
task.
strong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Really?
coffee's a great drug. Yeah, well, coffee, I'm a fast metabolizer of coffee, so luckily I could, but I still don't consume it past 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But
Wow.
it works really
Wow.
well for me, especially if I give like sometimes I'll take a day off or just do 1 cup instead of my normal 3 or 4 cups, and then the next day, coffee is like has a bigger hit. So just abstaining from it or backing off a little bit on a day that I don't need it, like over the weekends I was doing farm work outside, and I don't go through like a caffeine withdrawal if I'm just outside in the sun doing. But if I'm have a big day at the desk where I have to have a lot of work done, then
Hmm.
if I eliminate coffee or just have some tea, and then on my desk day it kind of resets my caffeine responsiveness. So
Wow.
just doing small variations like that can make a really big difference.
Make a big
It's
difference.
amazing. Yep.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the problem with amphetamines is it sometimes it can stimulate you too much, and you get into like a state of euphoria, and you're so happy that when it comes to like work, which most people, like most college kids that take these things, take these type of ADHD medications, they take it to get knock out papers and get more work done. But sometimes if you take too much, right? That's why again, not medical advice, but people that do take it, they do very low
Mhm.
dose, like 5 milligrams. You you get too stimulated. Something like modafinil, which is not very stimulated, just a wakefulness agent, that would probably be more beneficial because you're not in a state of euphoria. You're just awake and you're ready to go versus being so happy and like want to give random strangers hugs, because that can happen when you're too stimulated.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a fine line of balancing it
Yeah.
out. But I think it's interesting that because, yeah, like the Department of Defense, they have a huge budget. They have some of the smartest people. They have an incredible organization over there. They could prescribe pharmacological drugs all day long, like modafinil and ADHD medication. But it's interesting that they're so persistent and motivated to talk about ketosis and maybe get it, and we can get into BHB salts or ketone esters, because they're like, wow, this is so useful, maybe to stack it on top of pharmacology, but there has to be something there that these pharmaceutical drugs can't do, like a state of ketosis can. So I think it's
Mhm.
very interesting that when they have all the access to all these high-profile scientists and medications from a pharmacological level, they still are reaching out to Dom and going through the ketogenic diet and getting these, keto esters or BHB salts. So yeah. Uh,
Well, I'd like to
So.
clarify that what I study is very, very specific, like central nervous system oxygen toxicity. So that's a
Mhm.
seizure. It's a grand mal seizure, and we know that ketosis is very potent at preventing that.
Right.
But research is being done now in hypoxic environments. So looking at ketosis under conditions of hypoxia, because if you put an athlete under hypoxia and put them on a treadmill and then give them a glucose solution or carbohydrates under ambient conditions or 1 atmosphere normal oxygen, you'll actually increase their performance. But under hypoxic conditions, you don't get that performance increase. And there's different reasons for that. Hypoxia may decrease the activity of pyruvate dehydrogenase complex and the glucose transporters and things. It's not fully clear why that's the case, but glucose sugar performance fuels do not work under hypoxia. So ketosis, then it's kind of like an interesting theory that's being practiced right now under conditions of hypoxia, so that you may have an advantage in that environment, environments where you're going to have seizures. But also a big push now is like there are a lot of guys in the military are overweight. So low carb
Oh wow.
diets didn't necessarily have to be at the level of ketogenic, but probably the big push now in the Department of Defense is we got to get our guys metabolically healthy and fit for there's resiliency and also readiness, right? So readiness is a big, so there's like programs on readiness, and it's thought a lot of these guys just are not at the readiness level that they need to be, and dropping weight, and they get like shin splints when they run a lot. You get guys that are overweight, and then they go to boot camp, and they're all messed up with their knees and their shin splints and things like that. If they just drop some weight, they'd be doing much better. And that's a strategy, just going low carb, even with the MREs, to just having a low carb.
When you're so I don't know your experience, obviously you're an expert and I'm just a human guinea pig, but in my experience with ketosis, I'm very clear and calm. In your experience, does it kind of get you into a meditative state but also lacking energy, or do you get energy with a calm Zen feeling, right? Because I could see someone that is in a ketogenic state. So for me, I drink a lot of coffee. I take stimulants like coffee, and then I take different nootropics like alpha GPC, and then we can get into that if you want. But I have a lot of energy throughout the day. I'm also a very energetic person. It's very hard for me to calm down. My brain is always racing. I'm 30 now, and I'm finally at 10:30 starting to get tired, which in my 20s, if it wasn't 3 in the morning and I could wake up at 7, I wasn't getting tired. I just have so much energy. My dad is almost 60 and he's not on TRT or anything, no HRT replacement, and he has more energy than me. So maybe it's a genetic thing, but do you notice that when you are in a state of ketosis, you seem very clear? You're like, you see the world, you're like, wow, all these like minions and rats are running around wasting time, and I have a direct approach on the objective because I'm clear and I have brain fog and I don't have anxiety. I'm very, very zen and clear. But what about the energy levels, the physical energy to go out and do things and get stuff done? Do you stack, in your experience, other compounds with maybe a ketone ester or a BHB salt, or being in a state of ketosis, or just being in a state of ketosis is good enough for you? You have plenty of energy working on the farm, working in the lab, cognitively and physical.
Yeah, there's different states can be optimized for different activities, right? So if I'm in a super calm kind of Zen-like state, which is good for writing and the flow of thoughts and putting new ideas down, that might not be ideal if I'm going to my barn gym and doing deadlifts, right? So I have to be kind of amped up.
I don't know. You look pretty good. You look pretty good. If anyone Googles Dom, you had a body on you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I've been training a long time, and it's like a lot of people ask, it's like, I didn't do the ketogenic diet and then work up to like a 700-pound deadlift. Like I started training when I was like 13 years old, so it's like I've been doing it for a long time, and I was eating massive amounts and maintaining a weight of 250 or 60 all through like college for the most part. But now I'm just to maintain like 210, 215, something like that. So, but the keto, I feel better. It's just a little over 6 foot, like 6'1", and I think it was like 216, 218, and that's like my default weight. That's kind of what I go back to, just eating like low carb, keto, intermittent fasting once or twice a week. I'm not forcing myself to eat. I'm eating according to kind of my body needs. I do notice that if I do a lot more work outside and start lifting more, my energy needs are higher, and I'm start eating a lot more protein to sustain the muscle growth and repair and things like that. But what I like to do a 3-day fast like every quarter, and what I do, I'll allocate a lot of writing time and a lot of reading time during that time, and I will use stimulants, but I'll probably use a little bit less. I'll use just maybe 2 cups of coffee instead of 4. Because fasting, I become very sensitive. Like your body becomes very sensitive to whatever you're giving it. And I noticed that. And if I have too much coffee, it has the opposite effect. Like I get a little bit too strung out, start getting a headache towards the end of the day. I wake up with I have to have coffee to overcome my withdrawal. I'll wake up kind of with a headache if I had too much coffee the next day, especially if I don't stay hydrated. So these are all sort of negative effects. But I think from from a readiness perspective, attacking the day physically and mentally, ideally you want to keep like a eucaloric diet, and you want to make sure you're giving your body the energy that it needs. And for me, I do low carb and keto. If I am fasting, sometimes I introduce ketone salts. The electrolytes really help out. You want to balance. I use a product called Keto Start, and that is sort of giving your body, restoring sodium and potassium, magnesium, things like that. And it boosts your ketones, so it's boosting your brain energy throughout the day. I think exogenous ketones are a really good nootropic, and I think they need to be studied in that way. We do see positive effects in our animal model studies. And we're doing some human research now on different compounds. But I think one can use the ketogenic diet in the state of ketosis for mental endurance and stamina. And then if they're training, they don't necessarily have to dump in carbohydrates, but to protein, increasing your protein to 1.5 to even 2 grams per kilogram, which is like, if I'm like 100 kilograms, so about 200 grams a day of protein, I would do if I'm physically active. If I'm just really sitting at my desk all day, 1.5 grams per, so about
that doesn't kick you out. That doesn't kick you out of
It
ketosis.
doesn't. No,
Wow.
I have like fatty cuts of meat, fatty fish. Lately, I've been eating a lot of turkey because we bought a 30-pound turkey. So and I realized I feel a little bit different when I eat turkey. Like I'm a little more calm. And I do think that if you're fasting and on a ketogenic diet, I feel like my serotonin levels may be a little bit lower, and eating red meat may. So I notice I feel better, if I'm eating.
Talk about the red meat. You cut out a little bit. You said
Yeah,
you
so,
notice when you eat red meat, and then that's when it cut out.
I'm a fan of red meat, and I was doing it. I did a carnivore diet, like a carnivore experiment, if you want to call it that. And I didn't feel I feel good if I eat red meat periodically, and I also eat liver too, and I can kind of feel the energy the next day. But I feel different, especially if I'm in a fasted state and if I eat red meat relative to turkey. Turkey will definitely have an effect later on. I can actually feel I'm more calm throughout the day. And I think when you go on low carb, especially some people, they'll have some angst and they'll have like some irritability associated with being in low carb. That could be from the relative change in glucose, so mild hypoglycemia. And I do think that by eating super tryptophan rich foods, you could supplement 5-HTP, but I didn't really find much benefit to that. But I noticed that eating turkey and poultry, that I feel that it could be a digestive thing too, but I feel a greater state of calm. Whereas if I'm really hitting the weights, and sometimes I do things kind of in like cycles when I have more time, that my strength and my growth are really contingent upon me getting a lot of beef. So I go through like different phases, and if I'm trying to gain weight, I will definitely introduce more beef. I mean, we have cows in the area. We live in a land of all grass-fed cows, so we have a good supply and a butcher that we go to. But if I'm going to be at the desk, I kind of run a little bit better if I don't have like a big steak and I'm eating things like turkey and chicken and sardines.
Right. Okay.
And a steak is kind of, I eat definitely steak almost every day, and a lot more when I'm going into a phase where I'm trying to gain some weight.
Interesting. And you don't get out of ketosis, or you're just adding more like macadamia nuts on top, so your fat is more elevated than the protein, so it counteracts it. Because I remember you saying, maybe it was on Rogan or Tim Ferris, that even just eating a whole piece of chicken breast will kick you out of ketosis. So in order to counteract that, you'd have to eat a lot of, like, for instance, so like macadamia nuts, like a very, very high mono unsaturated fat and saturated fat nuts to counteract that. So you're still in the good ratio. So theoretically, correct me if I'm wrong, could you eat like, I don't know, 200 grams of fat, 100 grams of protein, and still be in ketosis? You just have to add more fat if someone likes protein?
Yeah, I think so. It depends, you know, if you are in a calorie deficient state. If you had a couple of those meals previous during the day, it becomes like an energy sort of thing in your liver. But if your liver is kind of running a little bit low on glycogen, that probably won't kick you out of ketosis. And everybody's different too. There's some athletes that communicate with me and they show me their diet and there's exactly what they're eating. And they're like 225 grams of carbs a day and they're still running pretty high ketones, but they're on the bike like 6 hours a day, something like that, you know, and running and swimming and stuff. But for me, yeah, I think you get to understand your carb and protein threshold. And like if it's the day after doing deadlifts or squats or something like that, my body's running hot. And I think that there's a lot of growth and repair and cellular turnover kind of happening and maybe changes in hormones too. Sympathetic nervous system could be a little bit higher after doing these things. And that's why, I mean, it'll disrupt my sleep if I train really heavy and hard, you know, in the evening. I get my deep sleep is like cut in half when I do that. So I have to be, if it's something like a very, really hard session, try to hit it at like early about 4 p.m. instead of like 6. Or 2 or 3 p.m. But generally speaking, you know, red meat is an amazing food. It's super nutrient dense, and I have it in my diet, and I eat more of it if I'm in a gaining phase, a strength gaining phase, or weight gaining phase. Whereas if I'm kind of backing off a little bit and just going into a maintenance phase where I have to be more mentally productive and have more flow of thoughts and be calm, I become, I mean, even if it's not Thanksgiving, I'm a big fan of turkey. So turkey lately and sardines and mackerel are things that I eat pretty much every day during the week. And eggs. Gotcha. Yeah, so eggs are probably the biggest staple food. Eggs are amazing food, actually. So give eggs to my dogs. Eggs to my dogs.
Right, absolutely. No, so even with eggs, because I noticed I bought eggs the other day from Trader Joe's, and I was looking because I'm going back to doing ketosis. I did ketosis for about 3 years, and then I got off. I tried carnivore. I like to experiment, human guinea pig, but I'm definitely trying to center in more cognitive function. I'm pretty big guy. I'm 250 right now. I'm about 6'1", 6'2"-ish, and I've been eating like 700 calories a day for the past like 3 months, eating one meal a day, and I can't lose muscle mass, but it's also hard for me to lose fat. So I've never been shredded, but to keep on like size, like
you're eating 700 calories per day.
Yeah, I try to go to the extreme, and I still can't lose muscle mass.
Like anything. Wow.
I think I've been doing it for so long. Like I've been eating one meal a day on and off since like 2013. So it's been a while, you know, and also I've gone a long times with intermittent fasting, like way over the 24-hour period, probably at least 3 times a week for the past 10 years. So I think my body's kind of accustomed to it. And then when I used to check my blood ketone levels, you know, normal, I'd be at 1.5 millimolar, 1.6, 1.7. If I did exogenous ketones, you know, a BHB salt, it increased. And, you know, if I really stuck to it hard, where I was just eating a handful of nuts and, you know, macadamia nut oil and all that stuff, then I could keep my ketones up for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like for me to like keep on size is very, very easy with virtually like nothing supporting it. I don't know why it stays there, but I have a wide frame though. I have a powerlifting frame. So for me to get like lean cuisine ready for the beach is like drastically hard. I'd probably have to take some type of pharmacology to get like shredded, which I don't want to do because I don't care that much. I'm more for cognitive instead of like aesthetics, but I guess I'm just playing towards my genetics so I can kind of keep on muscle mass, but also not have to eat as much and, you know, cognitively be a 10 out of 10. That's what I'm focused on right now.
Yeah. Well, I think the training that you do is probably just maintaining that muscle, and your body is adapted to that. Whereas, you know, if you're younger, I don't know if I could have built muscle. For me, if I do intermittent fasting every day, I just lose a lot of size and strength. So, I mean, I eat less, definitely way less frequently, but, and I had, you know, breakfast this morning, but I need to get about 2 to 3 meals a day on long office days. Sometimes I'll do 1 meal a day, but I'll do 1 meal a day, maybe just once or twice a week. And it's when have a big task load, office task load. But if I did it all the time, which I did when I went on an intermittent fasting kick, it was like impossible for me to get the calories that I needed to maintain my size and strength. For some people, I think it's good if you have weight to lose. It becomes a really valuable tool that you can use to create a calorie deficit to lose weight. But it's like astonishing to me that you can maintain 250 plus pounds on your frame just eating like 700 calories a day.
You're gonna have to take me into the lab and run experiments on me.
If you track, a lot of people, not saying that you're not eating more calories, but a lot of people, me included, only until I started tracking my calories, I was pretty sure I was getting about 3,000 per day, but I was actually getting like 4,300 per day. Like I was getting almost 500 to 1,000 calories more than I thought. So my metabolism is pretty fast. And I was actually getting a lot more protein than I thought too. And I typically just run my ketones about 0.5 to 1.5 and maybe 2 towards the end of the day when my body's a little hungry, going into dinner. And that's when I feel best, actually, when I'm about 1 millimolar. I do not think there's a trend that, taking a ketone ester, the jack your ketones up to like 5 millimolar. It's not good in the same way that it's not good to spike your glucose, right? You want to keep your body hungry for that fuel. And when you jack your ketones up really high, that creates a metabolic acidosis. And then your body has to
ketoacidosis.
Yeah. Your kidneys have to deal with a little bit, and there's just like, and we can see changes in blood pH, like in our animals when we dose them up higher, and they just look sick and unwell when we get up to the 5 millimolar range. But I think the sweet spot for me is about 1 to 2 millimolar. That could be diet or supplement. And if I want to get more vegetables or even carbs in my diet, which I generally don't do, but sometimes I do, I can just boost that with an exogenous ketone salt. And then I can, you can feel it, especially when you're hungry and you want to drink something that's not releasing insulin, but giving your brain a form of fuel that can really enhance the flow state. I'll take exogenous ketones in the middle of the day.
Got you. So I just bought, we were talking before, I just bought Ketone Esters. I think it was Ketone 2.0 by Human. I think they're one of the, if not the only one that actually makes a legit ketone ester. And then I know there's like a ton of companies now that do BHB salts. Explain to people the difference between a ketone ester, BHB salts, and then kind of like the misleading information that people have with taking supplements to get into a state of ketosis, like the longevity. Because what I've heard is, I've heard some people, oh yeah, you take a ketone ester or you take BHB salts and then you get into a state, you're inducing a state of ketosis. And then as long as you follow up with the diet, you're good, you're smooth sailing. I've also heard that's not true at all. That's complete BS. So kind of what's the real information? Because I know a lot of people, there's a lot of monetary value to gain because people are trying to get rich, and that makes sense because that's life, that's business. And the ketone diet, when it comes to health, health is $1 trillion industry. So what is kind of like the misleading information when it comes to these quote unquote ketone supplements, whether it's an ester or BHB, and what is the real mechanism from like the top of the line scientists that, people look at when it comes to ketogenic diet? Like, you're the man. So.
Yeah, I've been studying them for quite some time, and they're nothing magical, I would say, but they have some really real world effects. Like the anti-seizure effects are profound. I mean, we've studied many different animal model systems. Not all ketones produce an anti-seizure effect. Specifically, we use beta hydroxybutyrate as our first anticonvulsant and would jack levels up really high and had no anti-seizure effect. So long story short, we developed something that elevated beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate in a 1-to-1 ratio. And then that had profound anti-seizure effect. So, there's different applications and there's a lot of nuance and it's very context dependent. But I think a lot of people are taking a ketone supplement for weight loss, right? Taking ketones, if you go into a state of ketosis naturally through fasting or the ketogenic diet, those ketones are made 100% from fat. So ketones are a fat-derived molecule that's made, from the liver. So if you're in a state of high ketosis, those ketone molecules, it's all coming from fat. I use a meter called the Readout Health makes the Biosense device, which measures breath acetone. When you blow into it and it shows a state of high acetone, all the carbons from that acetone are coming from your body fat if you're fasting, and you can kind of smell it on your breath. And it's kind of it's kind of rewarding to know that you're like literally blowing out fat, like your exhaust is fat. And in some ways, being in a state of ketosis, you are wasting energy because we have something called ketonuria. We can measure ketones in the urine and maybe lose about 100 calories a day through, if we're in a high state, that's a cookie or two. And then you have ketones in your blood, and then you're blowing out ketones through breath. So there's breath acetone. You can measure that with the Biosense device, which I really like because it saves you money and it's actually pretty accurate. And then there's beta hydroxybutyrate that you measure in the blood. And it's a little bit misleading because if you measure like 2 millimolar and then go for a walk, your ketosis will go up, but the meter will drop because you're using the beta hydroxybutyrate for fuel, right? So the beta hydroxybutyrate that you have in your body is a balance between production and utilization, whereas breath acetone is more stable assessment of fat oxidation. So if you really want to burn fat and have a good measurement of fat oxidation, the Biosense device is really pretty cool. And you don't have to buy all the strips or prick your finger. You just puff into the device. And then there's urine ketones, and that measures COS state. So when we take an exogenous ketone supplement, it's beta hydroxybutyrate, but some of it can convert to the other ketone molecules. So we're getting the benefits of that. Probably importantly that it lowers ghrelin. So ghrelin is a hunger hormone. And if we elevate beta hydroxybutyrate or other ketones, it tends to change the neuropharmacology of the brain in a way that impacts some of these hormones to reduce our appetite, or control our appetite. So that's one of the benefits. It has a profound lowering effect on blood glucose. So if you're type 2 diabetes, if you're hyperinsulinemia, and you consume a ketone ester or a ketone salt, that will lower your blood glucose is probably one of the most important medical things. I mean, I was not studying that, but we kept seeing it in the animals, and it was like, okay, we should do a paper on this, because it was like, at first I thought it was something that was bad. And I was like, well, what's happening to the liver? So, and we have different theories of why this was happening, but a ketone ester needs to get metabolized, and you have gluconeogenesis, and it could de-energize the liver to make more glucose, or it could be releasing insulin, which could facilitate glucose disposal out of the blood into tissues, or it could just be enhancing insulin sensitivity. The important thing is that if you have a meal and you consume ketones with it, you're going to have less of a rise in glucose, which is, I think it's a good thing, because I think the glucose is getting to where it needs to be. And it's helping to facilitate glucose uptake into muscles and things like that. So a recent study, like last week, showed that the alanine levels were reduced. So when your body is breaking down muscle for energy, it will catabolize gluconeogenic amino acids. And the key one is an amino acid called alanine. Your body will break down its muscle tissue to release that. If you consume exogenous ketones, the level, and we've seen this in metabolomics we did recently, we didn't publish it yet, the alanine drops quite a bit. So it has an anti-catabolic effect, not anabolic. But when we consume ketones, it's basically the ketones then replace glucose as a primary fuel. Your brain is happy, your liver senses that you have this energy, and then it changes your physiology in a way that is preventing you from breaking down your skeletal muscle. So this could be really important in the context of using exogenous ketones if you're using it to lose weight and you want to retain muscle, right? And the evolutionary advantage of going into a state of ketosis, the main advantage is that it's, we have like 20, 30, even a lean person has like 15, 20,000 calories of fat on their body, right? When we start fasting, we quickly burn up within 24 hours the liver glycogen and the stored glycogen. And then we start breaking down our own body, muscle and fat. And when we break down fat, some of the fat gets converted to ketones, and the elevation of ketones will prevent the skeletal muscle from being broken down for energy. So it's anti-catabolic. And in that context, I think in the context of like a bodybuilder or a fitness athlete or a wrestler trying to make weight, and to lose, no matter how you, even, I mean, with pharmaceuticals, if you're losing weight, you're losing muscle. So if you can lose less muscle, that's a good thing. And I think taking an exogenous ketone could be signaling, there's important signaling properties, the ketones could be helping you spare muscle as you're losing weight. So I think that's an important. Okay. And then the anti-cancer effects, anti-inflammatory effects, it's working through. We published a study with colleagues at Yale on the NLRP3 inflammasome. So there's like a molecule complex that's when it's activated, it produces a state of systemic inflammation. And this molecule is suppressed in the presence of beta hydroxybutyrate, prevents it from being activated and setting off a cascade of like IL-1 beta and IL-6 and TNF alpha. So you can attenuate that when you're in a state of ketosis. So people who have achy joints and brain fog, which could be due to a state of neuroinflammation. If we have systemic inflammation, those cytokines are crossing the blood-brain barrier and causing neuroinflammation, which can cause brain fog. And actually, neuroinflammation can be the precursor to accelerating the accumulation of proteins like amyloid and tau, which can cause Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. So keeping the body in a state of low inflammation is really important for brain longevity and thinking. Keep the body in a low inflammation state.
Gotcha. Yeah, you broke up a little bit, but we got it.
Yep.
So straight to the point answer. If I have to pick BHB salts or esters, what am I choosing?
Yeah, so medical applications, if you're a Navy SEAL diver, probably a ketone ester if you need to get ketones really elevated. Although for the everyday person, like I can basically take anything I want, and I use ketone salt product by Audacious Nutrition called Keto Start. There's a couple online. It's a relatively new product. So
you take that every day?
Start, yeah, it's like electrolytes and beta hydroxybutyrate. So I like an electrolyte supplement called LMNT. Yeah, Rob Wolf makes a great electrolyte supplement.
The link below is going to be sorry, guys, there's a delay, so that's why we're not talking over each other, but there's a little bit of a delay. All the links the link below to everything that Dom's talking about to click on to buy directly what he recommends. It's going to be easy, so you guys don't have to memorize this. What's the name of the company again that you would recommend?
Audacious Nutrition.
Okay, and then you said that you would take it every day, or you cycle it one every 2 days?
Keto Start. Yeah, I use 1 or 2 packets a day.
Interesting. And you take it the second you wake up and then afterwards, or how does that look?
Yeah, I'll take like a third of a packet in the morning and then use the other 2/3 of a packet in the mid-afternoon when I'm doing my last 3 or 4 hour stretch of writing or work,
awesome.
Or going into a workout. Yep.
Okay. And then someone that we kind of touched on this before, but this is kind of a personal question because I take protein powder. I probably take about not that much, like maybe 2 or 3 scoops a day just to make sure I keep my protein for my hair. I'm really into my hair. I have like a hair loss stack protocol with minoxidil, microneedling, ketoconazole shampoo. I'm into the weeds when it comes to hair growth. You might see me down in 6 months, and I might look like Wolverine in 6 months when we do a part 2. But so obviously protein plays a big part. I can actually tell the quality of hair, the density when I take protein powder, the quality, and obviously your hair is made of protein. So if I want to be in a state of ketosis and be optimal, Professor X mindset, but I also want to have, high quality skin, high quality hair, and I'm taking protein powder, just simple answer for people that, aren't scientists, you can take that protein, but you have to implement more fat, right? That's a simple answer.
Yeah, that's simple, but it's also a dose-dependent thing, Okay. So ideally, you want kind of like the ketogenic diet would be like 75% fat to 60% fat is probably what I more like. And then my protein probably makes up about at least 30% of my diet, with
Okay.
the rest being fibrous carbohydrates in the form of salads and vegetables and things like that.
Got you.
I think I can get into a state of ketosis really fast, but some people have a little bit of vegetables and it kicks them out. So that's why I really do advocate for measuring your ketone levels. And the more your body's into a state of ketosis, the more it adapts and you're able to make ketones easier. But we do find that it's elevating the ketones is really when you get the advantage of being on a ketogenic diet. So the ketones have some pretty important signaling properties that you feel over time. So being on a low carb diet where your glucose gets low, but your ketones are not elevated, can make you irritable, you still have sort of swings in energy. It's only once you kind of start dipping into your fat stores and making ketones in your liver, and then or exogenously, is that it keeps your brain happy, I would say. And that's when we see, and it makes sense, from a clinical perspective, is that's when we have the best anti-seizure control. And the etiology of epilepsy is largely unknown, but there's like various defects in brain signaling and brain energy. And we know that when the ketones are elevated, it corrects for that and then silences a wide variety of seizure types, not including, tonic-clonic seizures, but also absence seizures, when people just kind of stare off and are just kind of zoned out. We can see that has pretty good therapy for absence seizures.
Yeah, a lot of people, when it comes to the ketogenic diet, especially when it got introduced to the mainstream, I've heard a ton of people. I've heard men, women say, "Oh wow, yeah, my girlfriend got on the ketogenic diet and she lost so much weight and all this stuff." I was like, "Okay, was she monitoring her the millimolars of ketones in her blood?" Well, no, she's just kind of eating fat, but she lost a lot of weight and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I want to put this out there because a lot of people, if they're not monitoring their blood ketone levels, it could be arguably the worst thing you could do for your body, because if you're eating a lot of carbs where you're not really tracking, but you're also eating a lot of fat, that's like the worst diet you could possibly think of, right? Because you're cramming both. So
I think it's important if you're losing weight. Sorry, there's a delay, but if you're losing weight and that's your goal, it's probably putting you in the right direction. But I think you have to record subjectively how you feel. If your energy levels are high and you're cognitively kind of sharp, and then you also do regular blood work, which I think is important, and your metabolic biomarkers are, your triglycerides are low, inflammation's low, glucose is low, things like that. It's going to be important. And I keep a blog, ketonutrition.org. We have a blog where I talk about how to implement a ketogenic diet and the biomarkers you need to track and things like that, which could make it sort of easy for people just starting out.
I saw on your Instagram that you have a device, the one that you were talking about, that you blow in, and I'm actually going to buy one right when we get off. When we get off this call, I'm going to buy one because I'm going to take the ketogenic diet very serious again. I used to have the precision extract or extra, where I prick my finger like 4 times a day. Now with technology, obviously, I think I bought that in 2016, 2017. Now it's 2021. Would you recommend the blow one over that? It's more convenient and it's more accurate, or the blood still is the best?
The blood ketone meter is a useful tool in the context of ketogenic diet. It measures glucose and ketones, so that's the advantage of the Abbott Precision Extra. But if you're doing ketogenic diet or fasting to look at your state of ketosis but also optimize your fat loss, I think the breath ketone meter is just as good, and your breath ketones will correlate to blood beta hydroxybutyrate. So if you're less concerned about glucose, it's good to have both, really. If you're interested in tracking glucose, I would consider a continuous glucose monitor. You don't have to wear it all the time, but if you wear it for 4 weeks, that will give you, it's almost like an accountability partner. So it will give you, it's a behavioral tool. We actually have a study now with Dr. Allison Hull, former USF doc at Florida Medical Clinic, using a continuous glucose monitor system as a behavioral tool to ensure that people are adhering to a well-formulated ketogenic diet or low-carb diet. And that wearing this device and looking at the app actually changes behavior to optimize, adherence to the diet and maximize fat loss and optimize metabolic biomarkers.
Oh, wow.
So there's that. I mean, couple a CGM with a breath ketone meter, and then you have glucose, which is super important, and breath acetone, which is like breath fat, basically, are two super important. And you can kind of gamify it, right? So you get like a number on the meter and you try to beat that. And then you can, we know that certain level of ketosis will correlate with autophagy and activation of certain pathways for longevity. And you're not sticking your finger. You don't have to buy all the expensive strips that go into it, and you can blow into it thousands of times. So, and there's a pretty cool app that works with fasting, with zero fasting too. So,
wow, that's interesting. Yeah, the psychological component of knowing that you have that glucose monitor on you and you're looking, you're like, oh, Justin, you better stay straight, Justin, because you just elevated it versus not having that. It's kind of, it's a fugazi. It's not real. You don't really know. You're kind of just guessing. So I think that's actually a really good component. What's the company or what's the device that you would use? Because I'm going to buy one of those as well. What's the company for the breath to measure the ketones and, fat ketone in the breath? And then also, what is the glucose monitor name so people can just go to Amazon or whatever and buy it?
Yeah, so the breath is Readout Health, and it's kind of a class 1 FDA approved device. And the device is called Biosense. So Readout Health makes the Biosense device. And if they want to do blood, if they want to do the finger prick blood ketones and glucose, the Keto Mojo, it's kind of easy to remember, Keto Mojo, it's kind of what I use. The Abbott Precision Extra is also pretty good, although they're a little more expensive and they're more medical. The Keto Mojo is kind of more user-friendly, and so the strips are a little cheaper. And then for the continuous glucose monitor, you need a prescription for that. But if you sign up with levels, then and there might be a waiting list for that, but I do have a link somewhere that I can send to you that will move you to the front of the line. And then you can get that. And they send you, a couple, sensors that you just simply apply, and it syncs with the app. And then it's basically you have real-time observance of your continuous glucose monitor. And then you can take a picture of your food and it records it. And it gives you a wide variety of parameters. It can detect in me, like when I exercise or when I have a cup of coffee, like it says, hey, we saw that you just did this. Did you just exercise? So it's kind of like scary. It's like there's an AI system within the app, and it begins to learn your routine and what happens when you eat certain meals, and it can ping you and say, hey, we just saw that you exercise, so you could record that. So I think that's the future of metabolic optimization. And I think you could do it for a certain period of time and then not do it if you're so routine oriented. Or I'm always testing different foods and different things. So I use it as a testing evaluation tool.
Yeah, that's amazing. I definitely want to get one of those. So definitely send me the link. And then I could drop one down in the show description below. Would you say, so if someone was to be optimal, to have the cognitive function, the clarity from the ketogenic diet, right? And then maybe they're on hormone replacement like TRT for muscle growth, would that be like a super physiological being, like maximum muscle growth because you're taking exogenous testosterone, but also you have the mental clarity, so you're incredibly sharp and clear, but you're also crazy strong, if someone was prescribed TRT?
Yeah, TRT is kind of like a double-edged sword. I haven't went the TRT route though, but I do have quite a few friends that have, and no doubt you can see them. They get stronger and bigger. But I guess I take a form of HRT. I take DHEA, and which I get on Amazon, and I've adjusted the dose. Yeah, I found, I test my testosterone a lot, and what I find is 100 milligrams of DHEA will put my testosterone from the mid range to upper normal range by noon, and then it kind of goes back down to mid to low normal by evening. So there's a nice diurnal cycle. And if I stop the DHEA and then go measure again a couple days later, there's no suppressing effect. So I'm not suppressing my own testosterone. So that's the important thing for me, that I want to keep milking my own testosterone for as much as I can as I get older, and I'm pushing 50. So it's like, I know testosterone drops precipitously, as we age, but TRT, I think in guys that I know that are doing it successfully, they can administer a very small amount, like 40 milligrams or something per day, like with an insulin needle in the morning. So if I was to go that route, I would probably do that. But no doubt that if you need TRT, if you need testosterone and you introduce it, it will enhance your thinking cognitively, your metabolic health will improve. But I'm also it's like if you have a car, right? So I rebuilt, I collect motorcycles that are old, and I bought a carburetor that was a larger size carburetor for a particular motorcycle or quad ATV. And it's like putting nitrous or a bigger carburetor on a car that's not meant to handle that. And if you push, if you're jacking up your body with TRT, you're going to start getting muscle, it's doing really funky things. I could look at someone's blood profile and I can tell you, like, not only that they're on TRT, but I can tell you their dose. Like, I looked at enough blood, the HDL comes down, and you just see, like, very, very distinctive things within a CBC or CMP, a complete blood panel. And, once the level gets above physiological range, then I see things on blood work that are suggesting that this is going to take years off that person's life. So I think the important thing with TRT is to really try to keep within normal range. I'm trying to look at as much blood work as possible, because I know there will probably be a day where I'll probably go to TRT, but right now the DHEA is working for me, and it gives me like a 20% boost.
Wow,
but yeah, I think
incredible.
theoretically, TRT, ketogenic diet, exogenous ketones, and you're pitching like the limitless kind of scenario.
Limitless stack, yeah. If you want to become Captain America, that definitely could be optimal. You'll have a high vitality, but longevity might suffer drastically, and that gets into a whole nother argument. Would you rather live, a shorter high quality life to 70, or would you rather live a long normal life to 90? Some people, to be honest, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I know, they would rather live a more vitality life of 70 versus a normal life to 90. That's a trade-off that you have to take. And anytime you get into this stuff, when you get to the super physiological level, I've never done steroids. I've never done any type of testosterone, exogenous testosterone. I take Tunga Ali, Fagogia agrestis, from Andrew Huberman. He talks about that. So Tunga Ali, Fagogia agrestis. I take Tribulus because I did notice a little bit more energy from it. So I take those three. I have taken DHEA in the past, but then I stopped. But I might jump back on it now. But I'm 30. I was actually going to get my blood work very soon and be like, listen, if my T levels are low, like, I'll jump on. But yeah, if you do get to like 1,000 testosterone range, like you're pushing 1,100, 1,200, right? Where it's past the therapeutic dose. Now you're getting to the super physiological being, which some people live for, and to each his own. If that's your opinion, just know the risk, and it is dangerous. But if that's what you're into, then that's your choice. But I think you can get into like a weird range, but also if you have low testosterone, like my girl's stepdad, his testosterone levels were like 200. And he was like 46, so he got on TRT, and now he's sitting at like 600, 700, which me as a 30-year-old, I haven't tested my blood levels, but I have a lot of energy. My libido is good. Everything's functioning well. I'm probably sitting at like 600, 700. So he's just getting back to baseline, which also you could say, well, you're older, so you're not technically supposed to be there, just like your motorcycle analogy. So I think it is interesting. People definitely should look at it, but those are the top like test boosters that I've found was Tunga Ali, Fagogia agrestis, and Tribulus were the ones that actually work. I know there's a lot of like D-aspartic acid and a lot of BS on the market, but those are the top three that I've noticed. And then obviously DHEA coming from you. And I've tried that before. I noticed a difference, but I wasn't 100% sure because I never did any testing. And that's a good point, guys, to really, really consider is you can think this and that, but until you actually take the test, the blood work test, you're really guessing. Like with especially like trying to, gauge your ketone levels, you might be able to feel this and feel that, and there might be some relativeness to gauging that. But at the end of the day, if you're not testing, you really don't know, and it could be a placebo too. Like I know, like when I take a pre-workout, I would probably say it works at 50% capacity. The other 50% is because I want it to work so bad that I'm believing it. And I think that I'm super physiological, which in reality, if I was in the opposite mindset of like, this isn't going to work and take it, I might get a little bump, but not to the increase that I want to, because I want it so bad, right? It's kind of like, conspiracy theories. They want to believe so bad that they believe everything. So I think that's definitely a good topic to get on there, to understand that you are taking a risk.
Yeah, diet and exercise and sun and just like mental health, like less stress, can all boost your testosterone. But when you train, you're increasing androgen receptor density too. So even if you are, I have some guys that are, send me their testosterone, lifting like a lot of weight. And these are natural athletes, natural powerlifters, and they're moving a lot of weight. And I think for them to have that level of muscle and strength, I think they have a high level of androgen receptors at the muscle, and then they cruise along at 300, to 400. Yeah. So they're not high, but they're holding a lot of muscle. Their training is on point. But if you're in a calorie deficit, then over time your T levels will suffer. If you do a lot of fasting, typically your T levels, and that's why I do a 3-day fast and not like I found that 3 days is the cutoff point. Beyond that, my T levels go really low. So, but at 3 days, I have very little drop in T.
Right.
So that's kind of
intermittent fasting, though. They say that intermittent fasting actually increases testosterone. So a 24-hour or 16-hour fast actually increases it.
Yeah, I think that's the case, like as long as you're not doing like a super low calorie deficit, as long as like you're getting in enough calories. But I also think that intermittent fasting can reset, like it's resetting insulin sensitivity. It can help to reset androgen receptor sensitivity too. So there's a little bit of research on that, but it's more speculation than I would struggle to find a high quality publication for that. But theory is that when you do intermittent fasting, it's like amping up your androgen receptors to be, to be more receptive.
Sure. You could always tell when someone's on steroids for sure, because they have giant 3-dimensional shoulders, and there's more androgen receptors in the shoulders than anywhere else. So a natural, you can build big biceps, you can build a relatively big chest, but your shoulders always suffer, and that's how you can tell they're natural. It's not obviously like a direct it's a correlation, but it's not a definitive, like this is a black and white answer. But there is more androgen receptors in the shoulders than any other muscle. So when you see guys with that 3-dimensional look, you're like, okay, what are you on? And usually they're like, yeah, I'm taking test, or I'm doing Tren or Deca or all these crazy exogenous steroids. And it's interesting, and, man. You got, everything's a balancing act.
When we're younger, we're kind of on, and I was looking back, someone sent me a picture, I think I was 19, where I had like a delayed puberty a little bit. Like I didn't start growing a beard till like 18, I think, kind of. Wow. But I had back knee, like I had acne on my back, and like oily skin, and like that started getting pimples and stuff like right my senior year. And then I had a year or two, like 17, 18, 19, where I put on at least 50 to 60 pounds of muscle. And I just began eating like crazy. And my shoulders, one thing everyone was like, it looks like you have shoulder pads. And it was, and I had not used any kind of androgens or any kind of, performance enhancing supplements or anything like that.
Everyone thought you were on steroids. Everyone.
Yeah. It's just everything just kicked in, my testosterone just like kicked in. And the first thing I saw was just like my shoulders got like really big, like they were much bigger than they are now. And I think that was just the natural testosterone was just, and I regret I never measured my test back when I was younger, but I do use 2 labs, ZRT labs. They have a kit that you can get online if you don't want to go to a phlebotomist, and it's like a blood drop kit, and you can also do saliva, but the blood drop is probably more And another company I use called Base. So Base testing, and it's like they send you a kit and they have an app, and you could do saliva, hormones, and blood hormones, and all that. You don't have to go to a doctor. And so that's Base and ZRT Labs are kits that I use, and we use it for research too. ZRT Labs, we use it for the research we did with NASA and some of the military research.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, you're definitely giving a lot of good nuggets for people to use. That's why I like a lot of podcasts. People just talk and they'll talk, theoretically and philosophically, but I'm into the engineering, like let's get this stuff done. Let's implement this. And you've definitely given us a lot of stuff that people can implement while listening to this. Before we move past testosterone, have you noticed that ketogenic diets typically tend to have lower natural T than, carnivore, obviously, and then, you could say vegan or some type of paleo? I would imagine it doesn't affect you that much because testosterone is made from cholesterol, and when you're eating a lot of fat, you got a lot of cholesterol. So I would imagine it might actually be better. So what is your experience with that?
Yeah, we actually published a paper a while back on this, and found that a ketogenic diet that was eucaloric, meaning that it was basically met the energy needs and not at a calorie deficit, actually increased testosterone a bit. It was like 20% increase in testosterone over like a Western or control diet, and we didn't see an advantage. We saw a fat loss advantage, but we didn't see subjects were able to gain muscle, not a lot of muscle, but there was a little bit of muscle and a little bit of simultaneous decrease in fat loss. And that could have been attributed to the a little bit higher testosterone has a metabolic effect for sure, and helps people, lose fat. What we see in guys that are hypogonadal and have low T is that they start to resemble metabolic syndrome, where their glucose tends to start to come up, and they get intra-omental, or like that trunk adiposity, which correlates with insulin resistance and things like that. And you could do testosterone therapy in a guy that doesn't change anything and see a lot of that reverse in time if they're sitting at a low level, and that's not even really changing like their diet. So we know testosterone has pretty profound metabolic effects. Not to say that higher is better, but you want to make sure that you're in a healthy physiological range.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you the annoying question. I'm sure people have asked you this for the past decade. What's the optimal ketogenic diet from waking up to sleep? If somebody wanted to implement the ketogenic right now, but they wanted to use zero neurons to think about what to do, if they just read a paper and just did what you said, what would you say the optimal is for the average Joe?
Yeah, so it's not the clinical ketogenic diet, which would be upwards of 90 to 80% fat. So for the athlete, I would say about 60 to 70% fat, and so that you would have to count your macros to some extent, and then the balance of that being protein and with minimal amount of carbohydrates. So
okay,
and then so to start out, what would they?
So Justin wakes up, and Dom is the sensei. Justin wakes up. What is Justin eating?
I'll tell you what I ate this morning. I had leftover turkey and a bacon, not turkey bacon, but I had cooked bacon, and that made its own grease, right? And then turkey's pretty lean. So I actually had strips of white meat turkey that I threw in the pan that I was making bacon, and the turkey meat sucked up the bacon grease, which was pretty good. And then I put a product, I had coffee, and I put 1 or 2 scoops of Keto Brains, which is a nootropic, and it has theanine, alpha GPC, and stuff like that in it. So extra fat. So that was my breakfast: bacon, turkey, and the Keto Brains product, which is adding fat, right? And for lunch, sometimes I eat lunch, sometimes I don't. But for lunch, I'm going to have a product called, I have mackerel seasoned, and it's packed in olive oil. So it's like fish, omega-3s, and sometimes sardines, sometimes mackerel. And another product I use of food, it's Keto Brick. And it's the only legitimate bar that actually has ketogenic macros. And it's made by a company that I'll send you a link to the company. Robert Sykes is Keto Savage is I think his name. He goes by Keto Savage. So he's a pro natural, completely drug free bodybuilder, and he uses the ketogenic diet. Be coming out with a book soon. And I've tested so many bars. It's the only bar. So I'm going to have that for lunch, and for dinner, I think we're having salmon or trout. And usually that's when I get carbohydrates in. So I'll have like a salad, some broccoli. I'll make cauliflower mashed potatoes, or cauliflower mash, which is just throw a lot of butter, not potatoes.
I was about to say, Dom eats potatoes. Oh my God.
It's I didn't even know about. I followed keto for many years, and I went to a restaurant that had what I thought was mashed potatoes, and it was cauliflower mash, but it had the consistency of mashed potatoes. So I've been hooked on taking a head of cauliflower, you overcook it a bit, and then you put it like in a food processor and just add like salt, pepper, butter, and some olive oil. And it's like pretty legit mashed potato tasting, but like very little carbohydrates that have an impact on your glucose. And then I have like a keto mousse thing that I make at night. Sometimes I have like keto ice cream, like Rebel makes an ice cream, Halo, there's a couple other companies out there.
For sure. Yeah, you eat a lot of seafood. Do you ever worry about the mercury?
Yeah, I tested that, and I tend to eat fish that are lower on the food chain. So that's why I eat a lot of sardines and salmon and trout sometimes, but that's less. So that's like maybe once or twice a week. But sardines are something that I eat several times a week. And I was eating, if there's mercury in sardines, it would definitely show on my hair test and my blood test that I did. And I was eating a massive amount because Joe Rogan told me, I'm not sure if he told me on the podcast or separately when I was there doing the podcast, that he was eating sardines or another, it might have been tuna or another type of fish, and his mercury or arsenic levels were really high. So that actually got me a little worried. So I went back. The next day I ordered the tests, and I was eating massive amounts of sardines, and I had like non-detectable, like very low levels of mercury and arsenic and cadmium. But then it could be the company too. So I was using, a couple different, I'm very picky about the types of sardine that I got and how they're sourced and things like that. So Seasons makes a pretty good one. Wild Planet, okay. I think I was eating at the time, like, and even if it had like relatively low levels of mercury in it, it would be astronomical in me because I was eating like 4 or 5 cans a day of the sardines. So it was like a good test for this company. And the name of the company is Wild Planet, like no affiliation, no. They know I buy it because I think I mentioned it on Tim Ferris, and then their sales like skyrocketed. But I think I had a conversation with the owner on how they source it and how they environmentally sustain it. And that motivated me even more to buy from that company. But I think the big thing was that I ate massive amounts, like pounds of their fish, and had very low levels, almost non-detectable levels of heavy metal, which are like the big concern with fish.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, but if people didn't want to go down the fish route, you could supplement the sardines with the keto bar, and then if you didn't want to do that, let's say you wanted to eat real food, then you could just eat a piece of steak. And as long as you're eating more fat and you're testing yourself, you should be pretty good, right?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's important to test yourself because in the beginning, it might be hard to get to a state of ketosis. And then as your ketones get elevated, then you can start adding a little more of like carbohydrate-based foods, like, salads, and then like stir-fried vegetables. And then I eat berries, wild blueberries every night, but I put it in like whipped cream. Like we make our own like whipped cream or sour cream, and I put dark chocolate baking cocoa in it. And then maybe a little bit of like chocolate whey protein or some kind of protein powder that's chocolate, and mix it in. And then it'll be like my keto mousse I'll have, and pinch of cinnamon and things like that. So when I started eating keto, it was very kind of liberating, but also kind of indulgent, because for many years I had avoided. I even threw out so many egg yolks. I cringe at all the egg yolks that I've thrown out over the years. When I was younger, at one point, I think when I got braces, I was eating like 60 egg whites a day or something like that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was giving some to our dogs. We always had dogs, but I was threw away hundreds of thousands of egg yolks. So now
Wow. But
egg
eggs
yolks
have a
are
lot of protein though. So you have to eat more fat
ton of
with that, or
protein.
maybe cook it in like macadamia nut oil or avocado oil or
That's
something,
right.
because it does have a lot of protein.
Yep.
So I could see someone eating a ton of eggs and then maybe they take a couple protein shakes and they think they're in ketosis, but they're not.
That's right. Yep. And occasionally I'll make just like an egg yolk omelet. And an egg yolk actually has a macronutrient profile that mimics like what you'd call the modified ketogenic diet. So a little higher in
Mm.
protein, but it's like almost a perfect keto food, an egg yolk. And it has really everything your body needs. It's almost like a perfect food. Like egg yolks, sardines, liver occasionally. Liver can give you hypervitaminosis, like your vitamin A levels can be really high if you eat too much liver. But we usually have that at least once, maybe twice a week.
Do you take a multivitamin? So right now I'm taking Thorn AM PM. Do you take anything like that? Maybe if you're eating a lot of fat and you're not getting all your micronutrients, or you kind of just you don't take a multivitamin because you're getting enough.
Thorns are good. I take an eye supplement that has lutein and just kind of like a balance
Hmm.
of antioxidants, but mostly creatine. When you go on a ketogenic diet, I forgot to mention, some things can be low. In kids, we always see this. Carnitine levels drop because carnitine transports fat into the cell,
Mm.
and you're transporting so much fat because you're oxidizing so much fat, you can deplete your body of carnitine. So I use acetyl L-carnitine and carnitine tartrate are two forms of carnitine I'd recommend.
Hmm.
Let me see. Well, I take DHEA in the morning, first thing in the morning, one dose, 100 milligrams, and then I take omega
Every day,
3s
every single
every
day.
day. Yep. I take
Okay, cool.
DHEA, and I've measured myself multiple times throughout the day, and it tends to peak at around noon, and then it kind of like out of my system by like late afternoon. So I like that profile, and it doesn't suppress my own testosterone. So
Mm.
so that's good.
What product do you use?
Yeah, man, I was using a company, and then for some reason there was a supply chain. I'll have to look and see. There's two different companies. I think Amazing Formulas, I think, was one of them,
Okay.
but it is a little bit questionable, like the company. So like, but I took the product and then I measured, and legitimately it was elevated, but they had some kind of FDA recall on it. But from
Mm.
my perspective, I tested it, and it was a really good product. And Natural is another company. So I use the natural form of melatonin. So omega 3, zinc, and vitamin D3, and creatine, acetyl-L-carnitine, ketone salts, DHEA. I was going to say I take hardly no supplements, but now it's kind of coming. So that kind of sounds like a lot. But and then
Yeah.
occasionally I'll take like tyrosine during the day. I'll mix it with the ketone salts, and tyrosine boosts your dopamine a little bit.
Hmm.
So if I need a little bit of motivation for training or something, I'll put like 1,000 milligrams of tyrosine or 2,000 milligrams of tyrosine. Alpha. Okay, so alpha GPC, theanine, lion's mane are in keto brains. So that's a powder that I put into my
Mm.
coffee in the morning. Not every morning, but some mornings. So
Yeah, I'm gonna ask
I
you
think
for a
that's
list
about
of
it.
all the stuff
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
take all that
I
stuff
write it all out.
separately.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So yeah, I use basically what I described are things that I use almost every day. The keto brains I use a couple times a week, and then melatonin I take every night. So,
Really?
and then I take things like CBD or Delta 8 or whatever. Like occasionally, there's a couple like separate, gray market things that I take too, kind of on the side. I pull out
I got
that
you.
stuff occasionally. But the CBD too, if I feel like inflamed, and my wife is kind of against all that stuff, but I convinced her to take high dose of CBD when she got nauseous. She was battling something, and then like the nausea went away instantly, and she was like fine. So she's almost like a
Wow.
believer in that.
And does that
But it's
impair
like
any
a
cognitive
pharma grade
function?
CBD. No, not like a good full spectrum sort of CBD product where you deliver about 30 to 50 milligrams will have like an effect. I don't know. The stuff I buy online doesn't, so I just like go through a pharmaceutical
Right. Yeah. The good
and get it
stuff.
through there. The good stuff. Yeah. There are a couple companies that are pretty good. But occasionally I'll take the CBD at night, but I'll take melatonin every night. So I've been taking
It's
that
interesting you
for a
take
long time.
melatonin. Do you take instant release or do you take a sustained release? Because I know Gorilla Mind, they have a Gorilla Dream, and I took it for a while, but I kept waking up. I took melatonin for a while, but I kept waking up. And I talked to my girl. My girl's a PA. She did some of her, what do they call it? Some of her trainings at Moffitt, and
Residency,
she's
yeah.
just like, residency, yeah. And she said the problem is that when you take that, yes, it does put you to sleep, but you're not getting the long quality of sleep. So then I was like, okay, cool. And then I did some more research, and then I found sustained. So I found instant release melatonin and then sustained release melatonin to keep you asleep throughout the night. Do you dive into sustained release or only instant? And with the test that you're taking, engaging your sleep, have you noticed like a decrease in the overall quality, or it's gotten better, or it stays the same?
Well, I take natural makes it chewable melatonin that's like 3 milligrams, and I chew it, hold it underneath my tongue, and I feel it within about 15 minutes. So my issue is that my mind's always racing, so I have problems falling asleep. And then once I fall asleep, my deep sleep is good. My REMs, I get like 2 hours of deep and 2 hours of REM each night. Like I get really, really good sleep pretty much all the time, unless something's really on my mind. So I've measured melatonin. I use BASE, that kit that you can get online that does saliva and blood testing. Not sure the ZRT Labs has it, but BASE has a test that you can measure your melatonin. I was very interested in the company for this reason. And I measured my melatonin like after taking it and then in the morning, and my melatonin was still kind of elevated in the morning, which suggested that, it's kind of still in your system. That's why I was a little bit groggy. But so although I have a chewable, fast-acting melatonin, it spikes my levels up to where it's still a little bit elevated in the morning. But by the time I have my coffee, and my first thing is like I wake up and I go running to the pasture barefoot, and I'm running east into the sun, and the dogs are chasing me, and I let the cows out. And it's like no caffeine. I just drink a glass of water barefoot, even if it's cold out, and I just run to the pasture, and then the dogs chase me. It's like this little fun game we do. And so I'm not groggy, but when the results come back, they interpret the results for you, and they say you must be feeling like groggy because your melatonin's like elevated in the morning. And that was a super fast acting melatonin. And then it works very fast, but it's still in my system, probably because I do eat at night. So I eat within about 2 hours before, but I eat kind of a heavy fat dessert with my keto mousse.
Right.
And I know a lot of people are eating, at night, but I just undereat during the day because that's when I need to have the best mental energy, and I tend to get more of my calories in the evening.
I'm the exact same. I don't know if you have the answer for this, but I found this when I jumped on the ketogenic diet years ago, 2016, 2017, when I heard you on Rogan and Tim Ferris, and I started doing it within a couple weeks. And I was taking a BHB salt called Ketogenics, and I know that they rebranded now. And I think I was taking Prove It as well. I was taking BHB salts, and those are pretty good companies. I noticed that when I woke up, there was no struggle. When I was eating sugar, when I was eating carbohydrates, like a lot of rich carbohydrates, I would wake up and I would feel like not psychologically not demotivated, but physically it was like a drag. I felt like someone was holding me down. Yeah, and for whatever reason, when I started doing the ketogenic diet, I don't know if it was just a placebo thing or whatever, but I could wake up and I could just jump out of bed, and I didn't feel like that's like I had to get out of sleep. I felt like once I was awake, I was there, present, and I was sharp, and it was effortless. Versus and I've never experienced that on anything else except for the ketogenic diet. Is that just me, or is there science behind that?
Yeah, I mean, remember eating carbs, especially when I was younger, and I would just have this like big bowl of oatmeal at nighttime, and I would throw like whey protein powder in it with a couple bananas and stuff. And a lot of times it would dump a lot of insulin, and then I would go like hypoglycemic at night, and I would wake up almost like with a headache and hunger pangs. And it was like I would call it a carb hangover. And my friends experienced it too. I mean, we were always, yeah, it's like, I think it happens if you eat a lot of calories, but it doesn't happen if you're eating ketogenic and have a lot of calories at night. So
It was
it's,
the strangest thing.
yeah,
Strangest thing. I would wake
yeah,
up effortless. Like I could
yeah,
just get out of bed. There was no pains. There
yeah,
was no like grogginess. It was like you had 2 cups of coffee. You just woke up nice and clean. It was amazing. I forgot about
yeah,
that
yeah.
until recently.
Yeah, I had problems getting out of bed. I don't know if it was a dopamine thing or just a metabolic thing, but I tend to feel that it was just a carb rebound thing because I would just carb up at night, like doing like carb backloading or whatever. And then when and I do still get the majority of my carbs at night, but I just kind of cap it at like 50 to, it's just like berries and I have it with fat. So I don't have the big, glucose spike or insulin dump. But yeah, I can kind of say I had the same thing. Like with keto, it's just easier to get up and get going, and I just felt lighter on my feet and sharper and just more
Yeah.
productive all around.
It was strange. I want to do a part 2 with you. I could be on the phone for 12 hours straight because I find your work so intriguing. I love what you're doing. I love how you're impacting lives. You're a brilliant guy. If I had to think of like the Hulk, but the Bruce Banner scientist in the lab, Dom D'Agostino is my Bruce Banner, and I think you're doing a lot of great work for the universe and society. I think you're helping a lot of people, whether it's cancer, whether it's cognitive function, whether it's just ultimate vitality. And I really appreciate your work and. So that's why I wanted to have you on. The last question, or it's kind of like a 2-part question that I want to ask you is, when I heard about you, it was 2015, now it's 2021, so that's 6 years. What have you realized since that time? Maybe they only heard you on Rogan or Ferris. What was a new discovery about the ketogenic diet? And then what was something that you were kind of wrong on? And you're like, well, that's not totally accurate because of X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wrong about many different things. So I can kind of go into that. But a thing that I changed my mind about would be, I don't think the ketogenic diet is for everybody. And there are some pretty profound changes in lipid profile that some people have that we don't know what it means. For example, the LDL cholesterol can go up really remarkably high in some people, whereas other biomarkers in the same people, are going in the right direction. So with LDL skyrocketing, and we consider LDL the bad cholesterol. So I'm still kind of on the fence about that, but I've looked at quite a bit of blood, and I would say like 20% of people have unfavorable changes in biomarkers. And I thought it's not, and I think I have a publication, a review about this that I co-authored with Jeff Volek and Lucia Aronica. She's at Stanford, and it's about personalizing the ketogenic diet. And we have various SNPs and genetic markers that would predict that in some cases the ketogenic diet's definitely not optimal and could be not the ideal diet. So I think
why people should get tested.
Yeah, that's why I'm a big pusher of doing like blood work, looking at if your triglycerides and inflammatory markers get elevated over time, that's a negative sign. That means your fat is backing up in your blood, and over time, in the beginning, that might be the case because your body's not burning fat. So your triglycerides may be elevated, but as you train your mitochondria and various fatty acid enzyme systems to metabolize fat, and maybe if we go into it with a little bit of a calorie deficit, that can help us burn more fat. But when I see over 3 or 4 months, triglycerides elevated, HSCRP elevated, insulin's not coming down, then that, and it's a subset, maybe about 10, maybe upwards of 15% of people, like I see this. And I was like, well, my first thought is that they're not on a ketogenic, but they'll send me exactly what they're eating. So I think there's about 10 to 50% of people who really have an unfavorable response to a high fat ketogenic diet. That's not to say low carb would not work for them, but they might want to do just like protein and veggies. They want to do high protein, moderate fat, low carb, instead of high fat,
Gotcha.
moderate protein.
Maybe like the slow carb diet, like kind of like the slow carb, like 4 hour body type diet.
Yep.
That's
Exactly.
interesting.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I didn't think that, that was necessarily a problem, because we don't really see it in the epilepsy world. Like in most kids adapt to the ketogenic diet, but kids' metabolism are kind of robust. So things that, I guess I was wrong on that. And I think that's, I thought I was an advocate for everybody kind of following the ketogenic diet, but I think we need to, the ketogenic diet is an important tool that someone can use, obviously, for like epilepsy, cancer, and other things, but also an important tool for weight loss. Some people, no matter what they do, they cannot lose weight. But when they follow a ketogenic diet, they actually adhere to a calorie deficit that allows them not only to lose weight, but the most important thing is to sustain that weight loss. And a ketogenic diet, probably its most powerful thing is that it can help people sustain that weight loss. And for a couple of different reasons we can go into.
Yeah. So I heard that, I think it was Tim Ferris that said it. He said for ketogenic diet, benefits are cognitive function and health, mainly in the form of cancer. If you want strength and burst and output, if you're a sprinter, you want carbohydrates, protein. So if you want to be incredibly smart and you want to hinder any type of cancer tumors or any type of cancer cell, mutation, ketogenic diet is the ideal diet, or Lyme disease or whatever, right? But if you want to be super athletic, and it's not long distance running, because obviously there's a big component with the ketogenic diet with cardio. It drastically helps versus, if you're doing deadlifts or something, right? And obviously you're, a huge component of deadlifts, and you might be the one that's like, well, that's actually not true, because I can deadlift. I think you deadlifted 1,000 pounds at one time.
No, not 1,000.
Was it 800?
Like 500. 500 for sets of like, I think 500 for 20 was my best, but typically my typical workout is like 585, 675.
See, I like Dom so much that I inflate his numbers, because I like what he does so much. But so I've heard that Tim Ferriss actually, right. I think I talked to Mark Bell, and he did that once, but he had the whole thing on, or not. He did 1,000-pound squat.
Yeah, Mark's a beast.
Yeah.
He's like, that's like upper echelons of powerlifting.
I love Mark. Shout out to Mark Bell Power Podcast. But anyways, what I was getting into is that Tim basically said, cognitive function and for longevity, health purposes, and maybe for like long distance running, like cardio or something. But when it comes to like extreme force output, obviously you want to utilize glucose and protein. So is that accurate? Am I missing something, or is that kind of like a good staple to kind of separate the two?
Yeah. So with sports that require sustained or periodic bursts of high intensity energy, like MMA, sprinting, the ketogenic diet is probably not optimal. I think we know that. But what we do know is that you just need a little bit of carbs really to sustain that activity. So it's good to train in a way that keeps your body hungry for carbohydrates. And then in and around your training, you can just sip on, 30 to 50 grams of a slow releasing carb throughout, your training. If you have like, if your workouts are 3-4 hours, like some people, you want to titrate the amount of carbohydrates to prevent glycogen depletion in the muscles. And you can almost like look at an individual who's lean and just determine whether they're depleted in glycogen or not. So I think you need to titrate so that's why I'm an advocate of also using continuous glucose monitoring and testing. If you're bolusing big doses of sugar and carbs and your glucose is spiking up to like 200, that's going to be impairing your recovery. Like it's going to be kicking on inflammation and causing problems. So we want to be able to, use targeted nutrition in and around our training to keep metabolic biomarkers within optimal range. And I don't think we don't need to be, drinking 200 grams of sugar in and around our training like I used to do when I was younger. I think that could be counterproductive. But a little bit of carbs, like 100 to 300 grams of carbs, would be really all you need to facilitate growth and performance for the average athlete. If with high intensity burster.
So you said recovery. So I'm curious. With post, a lot of people, especially bodybuilders, they'll say literally just eat honey or drink, anything with sugar, spike insulin release, and then all that post-workout, shake that you have or protein, because you spike your insulin, that's going to get fueled right into the muscle, replenish it, and inflammation is really good after the muscle, because if it's inflammation, that means you're growing, but only directly after. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so a little bit of carbs goes a long way. A little bit of carbs have a pretty profound anti-catabolic effect, insulin release, and it's good to start small, like 20 grams, 30, 40, 50 grams of carbs, and then work up, because if you're dumping in like 100, 200 grams of carbs, you're just going to have like spillover, where basically the glucose is not going to be partitioned in a way that's favorable for recovery. And then when you have excess glucose in circulation, it's causing things like glycation. The liver has to deal with it, and there's de novo lipogenesis with surplus calories in the form of sugars and things like that. And these things are energy dependent processes that can contribute to inflammation and metabolic derangement that are not helping you recover. So I think you just want to titrate the carbohydrates in enough to enhance recovery if you're going to do that. And you could still, if you train throughout the day, or if you just maintain a low carb diet and get slow carbs throughout the day and just add a little bit more around training, I think you can get the benefits of being low carb. If you just keep 100 grams of carbs a day on your off days or something like that, just in fibrous carbs.
So you don't agree with the insulin spike, though? Like a lot of bodybuilder trainers, they preach, spiking insulin at the end, so you can drive all those macronutrients into the muscle. You don't think that's a good idea?
Yeah, when I was younger, when I was like in my teens and early 20s, I did that a lot, and I can say that it definitely helped put on size and strength. I would like to go back and test, what it would be like in keto. But what I can tell you is that on a low carb or ketogenic approach, you can gain muscle, and you feel better throughout the day. And I don't. But if I was going to be a competitive bodybuilder, I would probably be consuming, 100 grams of carbs per meal for at least 3 meals a day. If I was going to just go all out, because I do think for maximum muscle, and these guys are doing that along with a lot of drugs and everything too, which probably can open up the ability to use more nutrients for fuel and more glucose.
Yeah, super anabolic.
But but for the recreational person that's out there seeking longevity, health, and that wants to be strong, I think you can definitely, maintaining muscle is way easier than building muscle. And I do think if your goal is to build the maximum amount of muscle as fast as possible, then I think it would be beneficial to add carbohydrates in small amounts and to see how your body reacts to that. But you'll certainly gain fat faster too, and your energy fluctuation will be more erratic during the day. So yeah, it's kind of like my general thoughts.
It's hard. It's kind of like a balancing act. You kind of get to the point where you go, okay, where can I push it to the very, very max, like the line to where other stuff isn't being compromised, right? Like when it comes to muscle, cognitive function, and hair. If you want to be optimal in all three, that is drastically hard because everything contradicts everything, right? So muscle growth and hair, and then also cognitive function counteracts. Like if you take finasteride, I know a lot of people that take finasteride for hair for holding on to hair. So it like hinders
Yeah, I did.
getting. Yeah. Okay. So it hinders the
I
conversion of
don't do it
DHT in
now,
the
but I
scalp.
did. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So so it hinders the conversion of DHT in the scalp. Well, that's great, and it does work, and you will keep hair density, and you will stop the progression of more hair loss. And if you throw in, kind of like my stack that I have with the microneedling and the minoxidil and then the castor oil and the ketoconazole shampoo, you will have like a full
Uh-huh.
head of hair, even if you're losing or you're prone to hair loss. But that's going to kill your sex drive. It's going to kill your testosterone. Your muscle is going to be you're going to be depleted, and you're going to have extreme brain fog. So it's like, okay, I don't want to take finasteride because I don't want to have brain fog, because I need to be cognitively alert because I have a business or I'm a scientist or whatever. And I also want to, be physical and look good and also have energy. So where's the line? And I've noticed teeter-totting on the triangle of hair loss, muscle, and cognitive function is very difficult because everything is counterintuitive. So it's where can we push the limits to the very brim to where it doesn't affect the other two. And then you could also throw in longevity.
Yeah. So keeping testosterone within the physiological range, I think, is important. And I've personally witnessed guys when they boost it above that, they have rapid hair loss from
Yeah.
DHT. I guess you can counteract that with finasteride. But I think when I started following a ketogenic diet and low carb, and my inflammation went down, it always ran a little bit high. My CRP, my inflammation is really low. And I used finasteride for a while. I did feel like a little bit of side effects, I thought, so I stopped, and I felt like a little bit better, I think. So I haven't been using that for at least a year or so. But I have a red light, so Juve. I use the Juve Elite system, which is red light therapy, and I know red light therapy can help boost. So I'm trying to think of what I do for. I don't really. I mean, take my wife takes like collagen and biotin and different things for hair. So sometimes I take some of her supplement for that. But I don't think it really does anything. But I think the red light. I feel red light might offer something. And I know there's PRP and microneedles, and then there's just literally moving the hair follicles from like the back of your neck here in different areas because they're not DHT sensitive. So if you have like male pattern alopecia on the top of your head, which I do here, you can kind of see it.
I mean, your hair looks
thinning,
pretty good for your age.
Yeah, you know what? It has stabilized. In my 20s and stuff, I was thinning, and then once I've been following the ketogenic diet, I'm losing it. But I think I've actually gotten a little bit of hair growth. I have minoxidil, and I use it on and off because it's just like messy to put in your hair, and sometimes it makes little white flakes and things like that. But I've been thinking about doing a hair stack again, because I think hair, once you start losing your hair, and a lot of guys just shave their head, and I think that looks great. But if I realized that changing my diet has allowed me to keep my hair, and I think going low carb, I just definitely see less hair loss once I've been doing low carb, and my inflammation got more than cut in half. It went down 80%. And I think systemic inflammation is a major contributor to hair loss. If I go back, and also super high protein, inflammation, sugar spikes, insulin. That's when I was like shedding hair in the sink, I would see it. But once I started going low carb, keto, intermittent fasting, my insulin levels went like almost sub physiological. And then my HSCRP is non-detectable. I have like no hair loss in that physiological state.
Wow. I'm really curious. I want to get you on my hair loss stack, because if you do all 4 within 6 months, you're going to look like Wolverine.
What are the 4 things? But is that
It's
finasteride is included?
No, I don't. Finasteride. So if your goal is only hair, which obviously both of our goals are not only hair, but if your goals are only hair, you definitely want to take finasteride because it definitely works. There has to be some component of the hair where you're hindering the progression. Minoxidil, as you know, just stimulates new follicles in what they identify as minoxidil hairs. Ironically, I do it in my beard too. And minoxidil beard hairs, after the stop of minoxidil, you actually keep the minoxidil beard hairs, but you don't keep them on the scalp. So you have to do minoxidil forever on the scalp, but in the beard, you keep them forever. It's very strange. I don't know the science behind that, but it's very strange. But if your goal is hair, finasteride definitely works. There has to be some mechanism where you stop the progression, not just stimulate new, you're stopping, progression. And then you might not notice, but years down the line, density will thin out. And then you're like, wow, I'm losing my hair because that's the density is getting decreased. You're thinning and thinning and thinning. Finasteride will definitely help with that. And even if you get off of finasteride, you will keep that. But you have to deal with the brain fog. You have to deal with your hormones or go right in the gutter. So I'm not willing to do that. But if you don't want to use finasteride, the stack for sure is. Can you hear me good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. If you don't want to use finasteride, then my stack is the biggest things is minoxidil and microneedling. I do microneedling 1.5 every Monday. So today's Monday, so I call it microneedling Monday. I do a 1.5 because that's going to get to the deepest part to where you're going to hinder scarring, and then I don't do any topicals that day because you don't want to put that much minoxidil in your bloodstream. You want to heal, so you do a full 24 hours after that. So I do 1.5 microneedling with a pen, not the derma, or not the, I guess it's a derma roller. That one doesn't work as well because when the needle goes around, you're actually tearing little slits of the skin. You want a pen that punches holes directly. So pop, pop, pop. So definitely get like a derma pen, like the Derminator or a Dr. pen. You can get them on Amazon. They're like $100. And then I do that once a week at 1.5 length. No topicals for a full 24 hours. And then the rest of the week, I use ketoconazole shampoo, and I use very high quality shampoo.
Yeah.
You can get $14. Yeah, you can get a $14 ketoconazole shampoo on Amazon, but I use like all the probably does the same thing, but my shampoo is like $50. I think it's DS Laboratories, very high quality. But is it necessary? Who knows? So I do the ketoconazole shampoo because that's going to hinder the converting DHT in the scalp. So we're stopping that. So we're kind of using like a not so much effective of finasteride, but effective enough with no side effects. So you're stopping some growth, some progression of loss with the ketoconazole. And then the biggest thing is the minoxidil and the microneedling. And then after 4 hours of drying, which I'm still not fully convinced that you need to wait 4 hours. I think the minoxidil dries within an hour. Then I apply castor oil, and that's kind of like the icing on the cake. And I don't think castor oil necessarily stimulates more growth. I think it makes the current hairs that you have more quality. So it makes it thicker and darker. I've noticed my beard, I used to dye my beard black. Now it's jet black and I don't dye it anymore. My beard used to be brown. So the minoxidil and the castor oil has actually made my hair darker. And what happens when it's darker? You're taking up more space, which makes it more full. And I'm only about 2.5 months in. Within the 6-month mark, you'll see me, I'll look like Wolverine. So
the microneedle then allows the minoxidil to penetrate farther down into the hair follicle. Is that the idea? Or
yeah. So also your body produces collagen. You're stimulating, there's a couple mechanisms, right? So it's collagen, blood flow, and now you're opening up to a point where now you can get more minoxidil into the bloodstream. So it's gonna hinder more stimulation from the minoxidil, right? But some people do like 0.5 and then they do topicals afterwards so they can get more absorption of minoxidil. But if you look at like a hair scale, like you probably know this, if you look on the skin, you have to get down to 1.5 to really target where your body's going to start producing collagen. And then that's actually too far in to put in minoxidil. And then if you do put a topical on, you're going to like pass out because you're going to have more absorption of the chemical, and you don't want that. So you want to wait a full 24 hours of zero topicals. And it's good because one, you don't have to apply the annoying greasy minoxidil on your head and your face. Like I put it in my beard every day. You don't have to do it. So you get a full 24 hours of zero topicals, which is nice. So that's what I'll do tonight.
So you do, how many
the
times
biggest
a week?
moving with the microneedling?
Yeah,
once a week, only on Mondays. Yeah, you want to give your skin time to heal.
Yeah.
I want to see like the before and after with like 3 months of doing microneedling on the head, and you don't have a beard, so you don't care about that. But the head microneedling with minoxidil and then added castor oil.
Yeah.
Yeah. It works drastically. I saw a guy, he had like little peach fuzz, and within a year he looked like Jafar. It was crazy.
Yeah,
It
my
was so
beard
really
grows
sick.
really thick. Like if I let it grow out. Yeah, for
Oh yeah,
sure.
then you're good. You're blessed in that area. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely something to consider. So I've been obsessed with hair lately. So I've been on this hair kick, and but yeah, balancing hair with muscle mass and then cognitive function is extremely difficult because they all contradict each other.
Yeah, I think hair retention and maybe even the graying of hair is kind of a good indicator of activation of pathways that are speeding, aging process. And I
Yeah,
have a number of people, I get like hundreds of emails a day, and people have shared with me that fasting decreases the graying of hair, that ketogenic diets have decreased the graying of hair. And several people told me that, they have less hair loss when they follow a ketogenic
yeah.
diet.
I that's what I
Whereas,
think is the optimal.
yeah. And then,
Yeah,
supra calorie, a caloric surplus with high protein, which is kind of what I did in my early 20s and stuff, where I started losing my hair. And I was like, I can't be losing my hair. I just started freaking out. I was, maybe 24, 25. I was like, yeah,
right.
I am definitely losing my hair. So, but then I started, more of a moderate approach. But I was eating like 500 calories or 500 grams of carbs or grams of protein a day, and I forget what my carbs are, probably about 400 or 500 a day too.
Yeah, my journey to be super physiological, superhuman Justin is I'm, the older I get, I'm starting to. I think I'll get it perfect with like 35 because I just turned 30. But I think ketogenic diet with the hair loss, and then somehow we can try to figure out how to put on muscle as well, whether that's hormone replacement or whatever, or maybe another mechanism of action. Trying to titrate all of those things together is kind of like my goal. So
Man, you're starting far ahead with like 250 plus pounds of muscle. Then you have like a lot of
that's the
metabolic.
benefit. That's the one benefit to me is like a lot of people see me and they're like, "Are you on juice? Are you taking stuff?" And I'm like, "No, I have a lot of muscle memory. I've been working out since I was 14, and I'm an easy gainer, a hard loser." So
Mhm.
yeah, you might actually think I'm on, hormone replacement or I'm taking exogenous, types of steroids, but I'm actually not. That's just my one genetics. And I've been working out my whole life where I've ate, 1,000 carbs plus 1,000 grams of carbs a day for, 7 years straight. And I was able to put on this muscle. Your muscle has memory. So even if
Mhm.
you were working
Yeah.
out and maybe you transfer over to a ketogenic diet, you can keep that muscle as long as you're in a maintenance type of training, and also genetics play a big part because I know some people that the second they stop eating a lot of calories, they look flat, they look skinny, and they lose all their size. For me, I don't have that problem, but for me to be like lean cuisine, I've never been shredded, so that's the bad thing about it. So it depends on, it's like pick your poison, right? Um, but yeah, the ketogenic diet, I think
Yeah.
for me is like optimal because everything I want, the ketogenic diet pushes. And then also just aesthetics wise, I can keep on mass. So I don't have to eat crazy amounts of carbs and crazy amount of protein. So I can use the ketogenic diet, maintain, and then also shred up. So it's a work in progress,
Mhm.
but I'll let you know within 8 months how it goes down.
Yeah, it's a great lifestyle diet. Like, I mean, I remember eating very low fat, like fish and rice, like tuna fish packed in water and rice, and just having to, yeah, just eat every couple hours. And I'm
It's
glad I don't
exhausting,
have to do that anymore.
especially
And
like as a
yeah.
scientist like yourself, and especially as like an entrepreneur. Like it's actually the perfect diet if you really, really, really think about it, because you don't have to eat 24/7. You can literally take a break. So it's actually very interesting if you think about it. I hope I did I lose you?
Uh, a little bit, yeah. You're saying as an entrepreneur, so I don't
Oh
know if it's
yeah, I
my
was just
end or your end or the platform or whatever, but
no, it's fine. I was just saying as an entrepreneur, it actually works out drastically because you don't have to eat
yeah.
24/7. It's like if you really wanted to like the optimal entrepreneur diet, how can I be at my highest cognitive state and then eliminate distraction and not have to eat, because eating technically is a distraction, right? It's a survival mechanism. Like there's nothing better than the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, can live more. I
So
mean, eating. I don't want to downplay eating, but I love the time together, like eating dinner, and I try to do like breakfast in the morning with my wife, and then dinner at night. And a lot of times I'll just skip, lunch altogether because I'm just in a flow state. But it's great that
right.
I can, just maintain that flow state and not get hungry during the day. That's the
So you
major
do eat,
advantage. I never thought
yeah.
that could happen.
That's crazy. It's crazy. So you do eat breakfast though. I don't think I haven't eaten breakfast in like 10 years. I usually don't eat. I still haven't
Wow.
ate. I probably won't eat till 5 o'clock.
So I noticed that, if I eat breakfast and I have a packed, day, afternoon, then uh, I have a better workout later in the day if I do have breakfast, and then I'll eat dinner after that. And I feel it sets me up. I'm not as sharp as if I eat breakfast in the morning. So the days that, I mean, not like today I did eat breakfast, but on certain days where I have like a lot of teaching to do or other things, not that like this wasn't a big enough event, not to eat breakfast, but if I
Wow.
wanted to be
Wow,
as sharp
Dom.
as
Thank you.
possible,
You hurt my soul.
but
That's
I
good.
know, but I've been experimenting with different foods for breakfast. I was eating a lot of steak, and now that I'm eating turkey, I actually feel better during the day, and a better effect on mood and stuff during the day than eating like a lot of ground beef and stuff that I was doing. But I lose weight too fast if I skip breakfast. So that's kind of like the main
Mm,
reason. So I just do it. I intermittent fast about twice a week.
gotcha. Yeah, I do it
But
every day.
today was
So
not.
yeah, for me, I have a legit problem. I want to be sharp 24/7 at all times. So I couldn't, even on a Sunday, I want to be sharp because I always feel like there's something to do. And I feel like,
Mhm.
if I'm not progressively moving forward in all aspects of life, then I feel like I don't have a purpose. So I want to be sharp all the time. And it's kind of hard for me to like decompress and relax. So you probably have a more balanced approach than me, but uh, like I couldn't wake up and be like, you know what, today I don't want to be sharp. I want to just chill. Like that's like, oh man, that like gives me chills.
Yeah. Well, I think I just like breakfast with it's more of like a social thing, kind of. My wife, it's like we sit down and we discuss what the plan is for the day, and then I don't feel like sometimes things get crazy in the evening and I don't have time to eat until it's really late, and then I have to get all my calories in after like 8 o'clock at night,
Mm,
depending on my work day, and that
yeah.
becomes like an issue. When do you train though? Do you train in the evening, in the morning? Do you train
I
fasted?
usually train at nighttime. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I do train fasted, and I actually like lift fairly heavy, like not powerlifting, but I lift pretty heavy. I think I've been doing it for so long that my body's used to it. I don't get hungry at all.
Yeah.
Like if I eat in the morning, I kind of get like grossed out. Versus like my girlfriend, if she doesn't eat in the morning, she feels like she has brain fog and all these things. I've never been a breakfast eater. I just like the fact of
Mhm.
eating something the second I wake up, it just turns me off.
Yeah, it's so weird. I mean, me too. I feel best if I don't eat, but at the same time, I know if I don't eat, I'm running a calorie deficit during the day. And if I eat
Yeah.
breakfast, I feel a little bit sharper late to midday, I think, just
Mm.
because I've boosted my energy reserves a little bit. But on the other hand, if I fast for 3 days, I just feel great the entire time now, you know.
Yeah.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's like,
Absolutely.
and that's metabolic flexibility, and I think that's what you acquire over time when you do low carb, keto, and you do intermittent fasting or combinations of those
Mm.
things. And I think metabolic flexibility, promoting that's really important, and it gives you a lot of leverage and freedom, and it's very liberating not to be
Yeah.
tied to food all
Right.
the time.
Yeah. I think I've been doing it for so long and not eating breakfast virtually like my whole life. And besides when I was in school
Yeah.
when they forced you to eat breakfast, um, yeah, like I think my body's pretty much used to it. So it is interesting though, because not too many people. I tell people like my eating routine, they're like, "Dude, how do you do that?" And then they're like, "You're actually a lot bigger than I thought." And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
genetics. I think me never eating breakfast my entire life. My body's gotten used to it. So
And
um,
what did you weigh in high school? Like,
High
were you a
school, I
big kid in high
was.
school?
eh, I
Like
was. I
200?
fluctuated. Yeah, I fluctuated from. I remember wrestling. I was wrestling 185 class, and it was like a struggle. They're like, dude, you're gonna get down to 185. I think I was like
Oh,
200 to 205.
oh, that was a big high school kid. Yeah, that was big. I was like
Yeah.
165 going into my senior year, but I graduated like 195. And then the first 2 years in college, I was like two. At one point, I was 282 was the heaviest I ever got. But and I was
282.
just eating, like shoveling
Yeah.
food. 282. Yeah, I have a picture of that actually of me on my phone. It's like, man, I don't even look like
But I
that. My face
stayed.
was.
Right, right. No, I saw some of the pictures of you. You look juicy couture. You look good, man. You had the abs and you had the mass. So I was like, ooh, I had the muscle, but I never had the abs. So
It's all about the food, really. I think it's if
mhm.
you center your life around just like eating and getting in, and then just you do the work in the gym. I think it's kind of easy, and then you have the genetics, and then the passion, desire, and it's kind of like an addiction. I'm glad I kind of moved away from that, and I'm just more about longevity and strength, and just um, I want to be able to run, not necessarily a marathon, but I want to be able to run like 5 miles and be able to do that if I have to,
Yeah.
you know. And
Yeah. That's one thing that's lacking with me. I worked with Ben Patrick. I don't know if you know him. He's the knees over toes guy. Do you know who that
yeah,
is?
yeah, I've never met him, but I'm aware. Yeah, he's like super popular. One of my lab
Yeah.
tech turned me on. Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
amazing
So
information.
yeah, so he became one of my good buddies. He was out in Clearwater, and he actually went to Largo High School, and then he lives in LA, but his whole family is in Clearwater. So I went out there last Tuesday, and he put me through the ringer. It was a 15-minute workout, and I barely work out legs. Like I only work out legs literally for cognitive function and just to boost testosterone. I don't care how good my hamstrings look, right? Um, and he's just like, "Oh, do this and that." We did the sled, and it got to the point where I was so like physically out of shape. Like my muscles were good. I could push things. I could bench a lot. I could
Mhm.
move weight, but like the endurance was so bad that moving backwards, I literally couldn't move my leg. And it wasn't a muscle thing; it was an oxygen thing. So he's a great guy. Anyone that hasn't, I did a podcast with him. If anyone hasn't listened to the knees over toes guy, Ben Patrick, definitely check that out. I think we got cut off again. Sorry, guys. All right, there we go. He's back.
I'll have to check that out. Your
Yeah,
podcast.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah, no, we did a good one. He's so analytical, and I'm kind of like, I got you, Ben. But listen, what if this, and this happened in like a real life scenario? He's just so analytical. He actually
Mhm.
thinks like a scientist, but his content is amazing. He's just he's a caring guy. Like he's just like, yeah, man, come work out with me. We'll do this, we'll do that. And I was like, you don't have to tell me twice. So I got over there last Tuesday. I went over to Clearwater and worked out with him, and yeah, my muscles literally couldn't move, and it was awesome. And then he actually, the guy that he works out with, his name is Mr. Infinity. It's his gym in downtown Clearwater. He actually had like a little podcast studio. So I literally just jumped on the podcast and we just did one just off the rip. It was fun. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually go to
yeah.
Clearwater all the time in Honeymoon Island, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh wow.
it's
Yeah,
cool that
you're
I
in.
didn't know he was out this way. But you
Yeah,
say he
I'll
lives
connect you
in
guys.
LA, family's here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he lives in LA. I think he lives in I think he lives in Burbank, but he comes back and forth. I think his mom is here, and he went to high
Uh-huh.
school here, and he has a lot of friends here, and a lot of his coaches is called the ATG program. They're out here, and then he's also doing. He moved to LA because there's more connections, right? So for his podcast, for his stuff, there's more famous people, and that's going to help the brand
Mhm.
and help all his stuff. And
Yeah. Yeah.
but but yeah, he's a great guy. I'll connect you guys, and I think he did go back to LA, but next time he comes back, I think he's coming back in March. Um,
Yeah.
we should all get together, carpool, go over there and work out. That'd be awesome.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
that would be good. And then you film it, and then when you get your podcast going, then he could be one of your guests.
I have a podcast studio room in the barn. We have like a 4,000 square foot barn, and I'm reserving a room for podcast studio. So yeah.
That's awesome. I make only one recommendation. I'm in your top 5 guests. So within your first 5 guests, I want to be one of them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you got to come over
What's
and
on the
check it out.
Oh, I'm believe me, I want you to do all the science experiments on me as possible. And I know that you're top of the food chain, man. You're one of the top scientists in this field, and the fact that you're at USF is just mind blowing to me because we really don't have too many like top people. Like, there's a lot of people out in Silicon Valley and Northern California, like Stanford. Like you have Andrew Huberman and a lot of people. There's not too many people in the Tampa Bay area that are considered like high level scientists or experts from a mainstream scale. I'm sure like in the scientist community, like in the scientific community, there's a lot, but to be honest, you're the only one in the Tampa Bay area that I know of.
Well, I think that's because I'm researching things that have public appeal and public interest. And,
Right.
I think maybe being on some podcasts brought some attention to that. And some of our publications, we've had like multiple press releases on them and things like that. So it is very rewarding that you can do research and it's actionable and translatable. Like if I was studying, an enzyme system for my PhD that no one has ever heard about, like hemoxygenase 2 and mechanism, but when you're doing like a ketogenic diet, and then there's been a lot of public interest in that, people want to interview you. And I think that has really helped our research out a lot. And also the awareness that nutrition can really impact our brain health, not only just seizures, but like mental health, and cancer can affect hormones that influence the progression of cancer and things like that. So this is new information. If you go on clinicaltrials.gov, 10 years ago, there was not one clinical trial on like ketogenic diets and cancer, and now there's like over 40, right? And
Wow.
I do think that some of those trials are there because some of the podcasts, because some of the investigators like called me up and said, they're setting up clinical trials now. In many cases, they're using it to further augment the therapeutic efficacy of the standard of care or immune therapy. So the ketogenic diet in that context is an adjuvant, but still, nonetheless, I mean, they're doing, National Cancer Institute, funded research on the ketogenic diet, and no one would have ever thought that would happen. So it's been, and some of that is hopefully starting up at Moffitt soon. As I mentioned, maybe before we got on, the Moffitt CEO, formerly MD Anderson, is a big fan of the ketogenic diet and even using it himself. And I think we can expand our research. I would like to work with them in different capacities to move our preclinical animal model work into human clinical trials. And Moffitt seems to be very receptive to that.
Yep. Yeah, Moffitt's one of the best cancer hospitals and research hospitals in the world. So definitely, you're in the right place at the right time. So
yeah, it's very fortunate that Moffitt is on the USF property. They're right now. It's like a short walk from my lab, but it's like a separate entity. So I'm actually hoping Moffitt and USF collaborate more. I mean, we've always worked with Moffitt, but there's not a whole lot of collaboration at this point in time with USF and Moffitt. But I've kind of broken the barrier, and because Moffitt is super top tier place.
Yeah, Moffitt is amazing. Yeah, they're top, like I said, top research in cancer research. Moffitt is top 3. I think it's Moffitt, Cleveland Clinic, and MD Anderson.
Yep.
Yeah. No, shout out to Moffitt. Shout out to USF.
Yeah.
Cool, Dom. So what's on the horizon for you? What should people look forward to and expect from you in the future, near future, long-term future? What does that look like?
Yeah, I got a lot of irons in the fire right now. We do have a clinical trial that's kind of paused right now. We did the first cohort using continuous glucose monitoring as a behavioral tool for metabolic optimization. And that's with Dr. Allison Hull, who may be a great guest to have on your podcast. She's a very fiery medical doc from USF, and she runs a Florida medical clinic. So we're going in. We have some very interesting data. I'm working on an abstract today that we'll submit for presentation. So we're doing human research. We're looking at the effects of ketones as epigenetic regulators. So actually turning on different genes and actually directly acting on the histone that's called beta hydroxybutyrylation when the ketones directly impact, gene expression. We're looking at it in the context of Kabuki syndrome, which is a genetic disease, but also cancer. So ketones is really like a signaling hormone in a way, impacting different gene programs. So that's like one of the big projects. Looking at the effects of ketogenic diets on mental health is something that, and some of the data that's very interesting is coming out is looking at anxiety, and we use the GAD-7 score, the PSQ-9, and we also have a sleep index. So reductions in sleep, reductions in improvement in depression, and also a reduction in anxiety is some of the data that's coming out from our human subjects. And it was my wife that was really pushing for, it's like, well, you're looking at all these metabolic markers. Why don't you look at like how people feel, like depression, anxiety, like these are big things, especially as COVID started to happen. And glad we did, because that's some of the most impressive data coming out of the study so far, is that there's an improvement in mood, reduction in anxiety and sleep. So I'm interested in doing the second cohort. We see a lot of trends, and some things are significant, but I'm really excited to finish this trial. And that's our human. And then we have research at Duke University where we put human subjects inside a chamber, and then we instrument them to measure brain activity. They're using a simulator device where we look at, how sharp they are from reaction time. We have, blood. We're taking blood from them. It's going to a mass spec, and we're doing like real-time metabolomics and things like that. And they're inside a hyperbaric chamber, and we're doing, the subjects go in on a non-ketogenic diet and then on a ketogenic diet with a ketone supplement. And we look at the effect, and then we pressurize them to see, and we stop it right before they have a seizure. Believe it or not, it got approved by the IRB. But we push them to the point of their limit, and we look at the latency to oxygen toxicity right before they have a seizure, and we can detect brain activity that will detect an impending seizure. So we decompress before they achieve that. So we're doing sort of that study now. It was kind of paused because of COVID. But we would like to go and repeat that with a ketone ester that we used in the lab. And like no ketogenic diet, just put them on a ketone ester or ketone formulation. And so we have that, and then like a whole bunch of little pet projects in the lab that students are working on. So, and I'm very interested in doing more like educational outreach and entrepreneurial stuff, mostly educational outreach. So the Metabolic Health Summit, I help co-host that with my former PhD student, now Dr. Angela Poth, and Victoria are the two my two co-hosts at Metabolic Health Summit. And that'll be May, the first week in May, 2nd to 5th, I think, in May. And we bring in like all the top scientists, clinicians, PhD scientists, nutritionists, but we also make it an entrepreneurial event and networking event. JP Sears was our entertainment the last time we have. So we have like speakers come in. I think I might hit Joe Rogan up to see if he would do like a stand-up during our gala dinner. And the gala dinner, the proceeds actually help support the Charlie Foundation, which is for Ketogenic Diet, and Max Love Foundation. So like you, I've realized over time that I could bury myself in the lab and just do science and write papers. But the important thing is to create a platform, as you have done, and put information out that can actually help people and actually hit like a big target. So as I get older in life, I realize that it's not like what's on your CV. It's like what you're doing to help other people. And then educational outreach is probably the most important thing for that. Like Andrew Huberman has done, like with his science, bring his Stanford science, what you're doing by giving people like me a platform to talk about different things. So I've realized in my old age, as approaching 50, is that that's super important. And Metabolic Health Summit is really part of that idea that we had in the lab, it started at USF at Embassy Suites, and then it just grew out of control. And now it was in LA, and now it's going to be in Santa Barbara in May. And
Oh, nice.
we invite entrepreneurs, we invite any companies. There's going to be companies that have wearable technologies, basically glucose monitors, Aura. We work very closely with like the folks at Aura, right? Hopefully they're going to come, and we have different people that create ketogenic food products and supplements, and a wide variety of things will be there. So it'll be an entrepreneurial event, a networking event, lots of entrepreneurs scrambling to the space for metabolic optimization, whether it's a supplement, a food, or a digital technology. So it's going to be a good synergy of people there.
That's amazing. Yeah, I will definitely be there. So it's in Santa Barbara in May or March?
Yeah, May 2022. Okay. And I think I should know that May 2nd to 5th, I believe, is where we have the venue. It's pretty much right on the beach in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, Santa Barbara is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And
how do people buy tickets to that? Is there a link, or where do they go to buy tickets to that?
I'll send you a link to the tickets, where we just had, I think today we still have the Black Friday where it's like 20-30% off or something like that. Okay, but cool. I posted something on Instagram. I think if you go there, and I think in my bio there's a link to that, so people can find it there. And we have top tier, we have the top speakers on ketogenic diets, on metabolic therapies, brain health, performance optimization, cancer. Like, we hit all of the above. And
do you have
we didn't want
what's
to
the name?
Make it about science, or we wanted to make it more of an entrepreneurial event too.
Gotcha. Do you have Adam Gazzelli?
No, I don't think. What
do you know who that is? He was on Tim Ferris. He was on Tim Ferris. He created NeuroRacer, and he would create video games to increase cognitive performance. He's a very interesting guy, super smart guy. I think it was UC Berkeley. He was affiliated with UC Berkeley. It would be a good guy to reach out to, and he was on Tim Ferris, I believe, twice.
Yeah, I would like to. It has like a metabolic health theme, but we also want to bring in a panel discussion on things like psychedelics and psychedelic medicine as it impacts mental health. So we have a lot of people are interested in that. So we might bring in, we're going to have some companies that have new kind of psychedelic technologies, if you would, on this, and different mushroom bioactives. They're going to be part of the event too. And we probably want to expand the platform to include more companies like this that are developing products, either formulations or technologies for personal, but also clinical applications.
I love it. I love it. How do people reach out to you? They want to get to know you better. They want to learn more about your stuff. What's the best way to get to Dom and all his affiliations?
KetoNutrition.org is the website that I maintain. All one word, KetoNutrition.org. And so you can message me through the website. Fairly active on social media. Pop in once or twice a week at least, even if things are super busy. I kind of just post about random stuff, but Twitter, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram are the different platforms. But Keto Nutrition has a blog where, I go in depth on many of the topics that we discussed today. Exogenous ketones, how to pick the right ones, all the different applications, ketogenic diets for cancer, ketogenic diets for cognitive function, for neurodegenerative diseases. Like, we have science writers that are PhDs that help us with this, PhD students or medical students, and then we vet out we have another one going out soon on the mechanisms of ketones. So a blog that will go out today. So lots of different topics there. Yep.
Well, Dom, I love everything you're doing. I think you're amazing. We got to do a part 2 soon, and man. I think you're making a big difference in the world, and kind of like what you said before, is you're getting that information out there, kind of like Huberman, and I hope that you create more platforms in the near, medium, and far future. And yeah, man, I can't say enough good things about you, man. Any questions for me before we end this?
Well, no, I just can't believe that you're in Tampa and that that we're like basically neighbors. So I would love to connect and do more things with you. I appreciate you giving me this platform to talk about what we do, and it actually makes a huge impact because people who listen to these podcasts implement some of these things, and it changes their lives. So I get so many emails every day about this, and I think the information is the most important sort of gift thing that you can provide to people, like information that they can use, actionable information. And I really just admire that you're reaching out and to people like me that can give information that you think gives people value. And I appreciate the opportunity. Very grateful for that, for being on today.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing. And I'm one of those guys that if I listen to Tim Ferris or Rogan and they have an expert on and, someone to the intellect of yourself, I'm writing it down and I'm implementing that day. So that's kind of why I created this podcast. I wanted to basically create like the Limitless podcast and talk to various different experts in various different fields and implement to have a better high quality of life and impact lives. And yeah, I mean, you're definitely one of my favorite guests for sure. And we'll do a part 2 soon. All right.
Great. Yeah, it shows that you're doing that you have a real personal, and I tell people to seek their passion, and that you're a self-experimenter, and that you have sort of a limbic sort of drive for this, like an emotional drive to just get the best information, use it yourself, and get it to others. So thank you again for that.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, you heard it here, folks. From Dom D'Agostino to Justin Caviar, this is the Justin Caviar Show, and we're out. Bye-bye, y'all.